The New 52 was DC's monumental seismic shift that changed the comics industry forever for a couple of years. In 2011, 13 years ago this month, that is why we are dedicating the month of September to a New 52 deep dive where we will continue, as we did last week, to dig through the crates, dig through the old internet, ye old internet of 2011, 12, and 13, to dissect the history of the New 52. I am very excited to be able to present to you guys part 2 of our New 52 deep dive. We have Gale.
Guys, there are at least 52 hot dogs here. What's up?
Marco.
New 52!
Tyler.
Hi, guys. I'm just going to be normal for mine.
And I'm Sean. Thank you for joining us, whether you are live or in the future. I see a lot of names in the chat already. You guys wake up early to mess with us. I appreciate you all so much. I'll shout a whole bunch of you out here in a few minutes. Do want to say thanks to all of the pals that made it to Tyler and I's appearance on the Near Mint Condition YouTube channel that happened this past Thursday. That was a great time. Thanks to the Minties and everybody else for being so awesome there. It was a blast.
It felt like a bit of a takeover in the chat, too. I kind of liked it. You guys came out in full force.
Yeah, you guys did amazing. The support you showed us was unbelievable. Unrivaled. I really didn't expect it, but I'm so grateful for it. Brian Adkins, what happened Thursday is that Tyler and I were on the Near Mint Condition YouTube channel. And we were a part of their Evergreen show. So if you guys are familiar with their channel, if you're familiar with that, then you know what that means. It was a great time. If you haven't had the chance to check it out, you can head on over there to watch that. But not now. Not now. Now.
Later.
Yeah, we're here to talk about the New 52. So last week, we talked about the success and the failures of the New 52. But today, I wanted to start by really digging in to how big of a success the New 52 was, because I feel like as bad as things are going to get, as rough as the conversation will get, as we expose a lot of the problems behind the scenes, I really want to underscore that the New 52 wasn't all bad. Especially if your metric for judging that is sales. Because the sales for the New 52, especially for the first year or so, were really good. The New 52 set records, actually. And I was poring over Comicron.com looking at the sales figures for the first 2 years, every month. I went month over month. This is one of my favorite websites. This website is amazing. If you want to know how many issues of Amazing Spider-Man sold in 1995, you can go to Comicron.com and you can find that out.
You love numbers, too. So it's just, I'm sure it's probably great, just like info sponge time.
Yeah, it's a good time.
It's a beautiful place, beautiful website. And so let's talk numbers. Let's get into it. So I've got a whole bunch of Comicron links pulled up, and I'll start from September. Because that's when the New 52 really kicked off in earnest. So this is what Comicron had to say about the month of September 2011. September 2011 was one of the great inflection points in the modern direct market history, though the scale of its impact wouldn't be fully apparent for another month. With DC relaunching most of its line in the New 52 event, comics unit sales increased by double digits. The overall market netted out 1% down, however, as graphic novel orders sank against strong comparatives. Scott Pilgrim and Walking Dead were drawing very well in September 2010. So the point they're making is that those books were down thus bringing the whole deal down a little bit, 1%. Back to the article. The numbers were further impacted by the fact that 41 of DC's titles were made returnable, and by custom, Diamond reduced those titles' rankings in the tables to the tune of 10%. This reflects copies that might have been reported as unsold by the end of the year and thus not paid for by retailers. The final totals for 2011 reflect more accurate numbers. Pause. What Comic-Con is saying right there is that these number ones were returnable, which is a concept that is largely foreign in the direct market anymore, especially with the big two. But what this meant at the time was that a retailer that had unsold stock of these issue ones, 41 of them, not all of them, 41 out of the 52, they could return those issues to Diamond and receive a full monetary return on their investment. So Diamond, as was custom, would take 10% of the reported sales off the top with the assumption that that amount is what would be returned by retailers. So the final numbers that I'm going to give you at the end of the year will reflect the accurate sales for these number ones. But at the moment, what I'm reporting to you is minus 10% for the ones that had returnability. Back to the article. Still, even with the reduction, comic unit sales were higher than they'd been in any month since December of 2008, which is before the general recession really took hold in the direct market. 6 titles topped the 100,000 copy mark. Even with the reduction, this was the most since July 2009. Batman #1 led the charts with more than 188,000 copies ordered. Orders for second place, Action Comics #1, were more than 182,000 copies. The third quarter closed up over 2010 by 3.55%. This was the first up quarter since the fourth quarter of 2010 and the first up third quarter since 2009. Only one title not published by Marvel and DC made the top 100.
Damn.
Dark Horse's Buffy the Vampire Slayer debut. Wow, that's incredible. So, what were the top 10? We talked last week about how 8 of the top 10 were DC titles. I'll rattle them off for you here now. Batman #1 at 188,000 units. Action Comics #1, 182,000. Green Lantern #1 came in at third with 141,000. So that's a 40K drop off from #2. Kind of steep, but okay. The Flash #1. This was actually by new writer Francis Manapul, who, of course, was a very talented artist, not yet a veteran in the industry, but never a writer prior to this. Go ahead.
Didn't Brian Piccoletto work with him on that one?
He was a co-writer.
Okay, yeah.
129,000 units sold. Superman at 118. Detective Comics 103. Batman the Dark Knight 98. It's not until the 8th slot that we see Marvel peak in. Fear Itself, issue 6, was 8th. Ultimate Comics Spider-Man was 9th. And pulling up the rear is Batman and Robin. Those last few titles all sold under 100,000 copies. So that means that in the month of September 2011, no Marvel series sold more than 100,000 copies.
Damn.
Wow.
I was curious where Spider-Man was at the time. This is 2011, 2012, right?
This is September of 2011.
Yeah, this was big time. So this is in the middle of Slot's run. Because I figured Spider-Man's probably a good indicator of where Marvel is at any time in terms of sales. But I totally forgot about Ultimate Comics Spider-Man. It always somehow beats out normal Spider-Man. But that low is unheard of nowadays for a Spider-Man title.
Well, speaking of the low, just because you brought it up, Amazing Spider-Man was actually 18th in sales this month. It was issue 669 and it sold 71,000 copies. Outsold by books like Batwoman, Aquaman, Teen Titans, and various other books. That will probably never happen again, but that's where we were in September of 2011.
And I'm seeing here that all of the Marvel books are $3.99 as opposed to the $2.99 of all the DC publications, except for Action Comics.
Yes. Yes. This is when Marvel made the shift to $3.99 for pretty much all their books, whereas DC was holding the line at $2. That changes at some point here in the intervening months where we start to see books like Batman go to $3.99. But largely DC's line is committed to the $2.99 price point, which is lovely. And I wish we could go back to that, but we can't.
Oh, we could. Different conversation.
Yeah. Okay. I love this. I love these numbers. I'm a sucker for it. I really wish I could just present to you all of the months in the first year of the New 52, because the records they were setting, the crazy books that were making it into the top 20, it's so fun to read. So if you're a nerd like me, then at some point, if you've got the time, I highly recommend taking a look at comichron.com and seeing some of the reports that they pushed out. But I'm going to push things a little forward, and I'm going to jump into the end of the year. I'm going to skip ahead to December to talk a little bit about how December wrapped up. So going back to Comichron with their article, given November's powerful performance, thanks mostly due to the New 52 relaunch, it had briefly looked as though 2011, a weak year in the beginning, might actually net out positive. But while total new comic sales were up for the month, it wasn't enough to offset the 16% year-over-year decline in trade paperback orders for December. So the year instead came in down less than 1%. It was a remarkable reversal, though, and the latter portion of 2011 would set up several successful years to follow. It made more remarkable by the fact that the average comic book cost considerably less in 2011 than it did in 2010. While that pumped up unit sales, it could have contributed in the shortfall in overall dollars. The average price of comic books dropped by a dime in 2011. Justice League number 4 led the market, and Diamond would simultaneously report Justice League number 1 as the top seller of the year. So the last year of 2011, the top 10 was Justice League number 4. Estimated units sold 142,000. So that is a 40,000 unit drop from where Batman number 1 and Action number 1 were in September when this whole deal started.
Wow.
So the top selling comic in December was 40,000 units down from where we were in September. But we still have several books crossing the 100,000 point. Batman number 4 at 133,000, Action at 112, Green Lantern at 104. That's where it ends. Then we get a Marvel book at number 5, Avengers X Sanction. Does that ring a bell for anybody?
That was the Cable event. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ed McGuinness drawing that one, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Boy, was I unhappy with that.
It looked cool, but I don't think I read it.
McGuinness art aside, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's issue number 1 of that, for those of you who are curious. Detective Comics at 89,000. Defenders number 1, 85,000. Flash still hanging in there, 77,000. That is a 50,000 unit drop off from issue 1. Batman the Dark Knight. Sorry,
for the Flash.
For the Flash, yeah.
Okay.
Sean, is that typical for number 1s?
It is typical to see a drop. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Typically, I think you're expecting, maybe you'll lose between 15 and 25% of your readership by the time you get to about issue 4. So I guess that's par for the course. And certainly Flash isn't the only book that's dropped off to those numbers. I mean, you've got Batman the Dark Knight, which has dropped significantly. That's the David Finch book where he's writing and drawing, which was a big deal at the time. And rounding out the top 10 is Superman with 68,000 units. So once again, Marvel with only 2 books in the top 10, closing out the year of 2011. Comic-Con had a lot of positive things to say about 2011 as a year. The latter half of it, I guess, because it began not in a great spot. I'm going to read just a little bit of what Comic-Con had to say about the end of 2011. DC's relaunch again boosted comics orders in October, while its reorders helping it place more titles in the top 300 than any publisher to date in the Diamond exclusive era. It's also the month with the highest sales yet for 300th place, over 5,000 copies, and the fewest number of publishers to date with titles in the top 300, only 13. DC's relaunch continued to boost comic sales in November, with drastic increases in year-to-year periodic sales. But there were also increases in trade paperback, causing 2011 overall to surge into positive territory. But December trade paperback orders were weak, causing the year to close out down less than 1% overall. The final numbers for the top 10 sales, this is the last time I'll refer to this until we get to the end of 2012. Justice League won out the year with 230,000 copies sold. That's a big number. We're not going to hear a number that high again until a very unexpected title is able to hit that mark. And I would love it if you guys wanted to try and guess what the book is that is number 1 at the end of the year 2012. Not now. Oh, okay. Let me just get through the rest of this, and then I'll give you your guys' spot. Batman, number 1, was 218,000 units sold. Action, number 1, 204,000 units sold. Those are final numbers, by the way. So those are numbers adjusted for returns. So Batman 1 was lower, I believe, on the initial list. It was like in the high 100,000s. Now it's up over 200,000. Justice League number 2 was 4th in the list with 186,000. Batman number 2 was number 5th on the list. Ultimate Spider-Man number 160 with 172,000. Green Lantern number 1, 172,000. Justice League number 3, 160,000. Action Comics and Detective round out the top 10. So a pretty impressive year for DC on the whole. Only one Marvel book making it in the top 10. That will never happen again. In the sense that in the intervening years, that has not occurred. Maybe it will with Absolute. We don't know. But as of now, this is historic.
Like, it couldn't with Absolute at this point because there's only 3 titles.
All In could help as well.
Yeah.
The overall initiative. But yeah, the New 52, by all accounts, a big success. And if I were to continue reading on, sorry?
It's a juggernaut.
Yeah. I won't go too much deeper into the numbers aspect, but July and February of 2012, all 10 of the slots in the top 10 sales charts, according to Comic-Con, were occupied by DC books.
Wow.
They shut Marvel out. Marvel actually had a bit of a struggle at this moment in time. As you heard, they didn't really have a lot of things that were lighting people on fire. The only things they could do to get into that space was Ultimate Spider-Man, which I believe at this point Miles had taken over the book.
Sounds right.
Possibly either that or it was the not David Marquez, the more rebooted Ultimate Comics where they had like a holographic cover.
I feel like it might have been like the tail end of the first altogether round of Ultimate Spider-Man before I think what you're talking about.
Is it Miles 2013? That's why I think.
It's
regardless.
crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So yeah, Marvel was having a big time struggle, and DC kept delivering hits because in June of 2012, DC launched something that was hugely controversial. They launched Before Watchmen.
Oh,
That's right.
Yeah.
wow.
Oh yeah,
They got-
the button was part of the New 52. That was a Flash Batman Flash Detective Comics crossover.
yeah, but that wouldn't happen
Batman.
until
It was the end.
geez,
Years later. Yeah.
Yeah.
2019. Like,
Yeah, this is
Like the
when
start
they've-
of Rebirth.
yeah.
Yeah,
Huh.
this is just Before Watchmen. And 4 of those books made it into the top 10 of the month of June.
I actually like some of
Interesting.
those books.
Some of those were pretty good.
I thought Before Watchmen was awesome. The ones I read anyway.
Darwin Cook on Minutemen. Great book.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was sick. So yeah, Get Shitty says just checked Miles debuted in August of 2011. So yeah, it was the Miles stuff that was
Mm.
doing it. And speaking of which, I want to say hello to some people. What's up? Amin Perez, Niobe Comics, how you doing? Near says hello, pals. Hello right back to you. Triple Ho, how you doing? Says, were there variants at launch? I'm pretty sure there were.
There must have been.
Yeah.
It's comics after all.
Yeah.
DV, how you doing? Cosmo, good to see you, Cosmo. Cosmo said, I've never heard of numbers that big. Wait until I tell you about 2012 and how that nets out. It's crazy. I cannot wait. I can't wait.
200,000 is a high number for modern, modern comics, post, I don't know, 1980 or whatever.
Yeah.
That's like the peak, I would say, nowadays. You
That's-
get
yeah.
the outliers are in the 500 range, but I would say 200 is like the most you could ever possibly do on a normal week.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nuts. So this what I'm about to read comes from Comic-Con once again. Diamond's top 300 comics had orders totaling $25.72 million, an increase of 44% over the previous May, and the highest total since Diamond became the sole distributor in 1997. It beat the total of 25.37 million set in December of 2008.
Wow.
That's crazy, guys. That is insane. This was the best May and the best month since Diamond became the sole distributor, going back to 97. That's nuts. Getting into 90s numbers is amazing, and that's how high this industry was firing in 2012.
For sure.
Beautiful. Now, let me get to the end of the year. I'm going to skip a lot. Get to the end of the year.
Uh-oh.
Does anybody want to take a guess as to the best-selling comic of 2012? Bonus points if you can guess the number range that it sold in. Chat, you can jump in on this as well. If you know the answer, please don't spoil it. If you really know it, like if you looked it up.
I don't know it. Is it just Society of America?
Wasn't out.
Wasn't out yet. I just remember it had 52 covers, so I was hoping that would game the system with sales.
What about Superman Unchained?
No.
That's
Okay.
a good guess. I was gonna say Justice League Dark. It must have been a team book.
Izzy. Hey, Izzy, how you doing? Says Dial H. No. CW Gordon,
Yeah.
good to see you. Says Invincible. No.
Izzy,
Garrick.
yeah, right. Come on.
Garrick the Taylor says Avengers vs. X-Men.
Oh,
Rami Darwish says Justice League. No. Get Shitty says Saga. No. Leonard Pig says The Flash. No. Nathan Chafin says World War Hulk. No. Unfortunately, that was a few years prior. Good to see you, though, Nathan. David Johnson says just joining in, and I feel I'm going to get a lot of hate, but I loved a lot of the new 52 runs. Me too.
hell yeah.
You're not going to get hate here at all for
Yeah,
that.
we'll get there, actually.
we'll tease you a little bit, but it's not hate. Don't worry.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys the answer because no one is even close.
Okay. Okay.
The answer is The Walking Dead number 100.
Oh, I didn't
Oh,
know the
yeah.
field was open. I thought it was a DC book. Come
Yeah.
on.
I said, what's the best-selling book?
A lot of covers for that one too. Yeah, that's what got me to stop reading the book.
353,000 units sold.
One
Wow.
thing though, I think that might game those numbers is that was the time of the loot box, and a lot of variants were in those boxes.
Oh, okay.
And I'm pretty sure that boosted their numbers pretty high.
Didn't the TV show come out right around then too?
Right around then, yeah, it was in
Yeah, it
the
would've been,
zeitgeist
yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about loot boxes. This is direct market sales, so I'm not sure if that has anything to do with this. But certainly Walking Dead was extremely popular at this time. I even have a copy of Walking Dead 100, and I didn't even know what The Walking Dead was really at this time.
Walking Dead
oh,
100. Okay, that also explains.
Yeah.
The Walking Dead had been out 2010, so it had already been 2 years. So
There you go.
the fervor there was already building, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you guys were talking about DC, right? You all were giving me DC guesses, and everybody thought that it would be a DC book that would be in number 1. What if I told you that not only was it not a DC book, but that no DC book at all would feature in the top 10 of 2012?
Oh, shit.
Damn.
Not one.
How quickly they fall.
Here's the list. Uncanny Avengers, number 1, 305,000 units sold.
Whoa.
Avengers versus X-Men, number 1, 265 units sold. This is in the thousands, of course. Amazing Spider-Man 700, 201,000 units sold. AVX 2, 6, 5, 3, 4, all in a row selling over 100,000 units. Avengers number 1, 187,000 units. All New X-Men number 1, 184,000 units, rounding out the tie. That's actually number 11. But that's when we get that's how it goes. It takes until number 17
Oof.
to get to a DC book. Batman number 13 sold 170,000 units. These are great numbers, but DC has fallen way outside of the conversation if we're talking about the best sellers in comics at this point.
Well, and what do you do, right? Like, you know, it was AVX, it was all new X-Men, it was like Bendis Appreciation Month.
I'd be curious to see what it would look like by series, because I know Avengers versus X-Men is taking up a lot of those spots.
By issue.
By issue, yeah, because it's obviously that's going to sell a lot. So that makes sense in my mind. If it was broken down by series, I'd be curious if DC would crack that top 10.
I mean, of course they would. By series, of course.
Made it to 17. So yeah.
I was just wondering if they would all there would be more. I think if it would be weighted more on DC's end.
No,
across the board. No,
it would be Batman and Justice League. Just looking at this, it takes to see a title that's not Batman or Justice League from DC. You have to go all the way down to number 47, which is before Watchmen Minutemen.
Wow.
There is no new 52 title outside of Batman or Justice League in the top 50.
Do you think this has anything to do with Avengers coming out that year? And Marvel becoming more in the zeitgeist?
Oh, the movie?
Yeah.
I think it has to do with the fact that the new 52 was already waning in interest. They did the 0 year stuff in December. I think it was September of 2012. And in that month, the new 52 did great because of the 0 issue gimmick. But outside of that, you can clearly see that the numbers aren't there the way they were in the first few months of the New 52.
I don't know about everybody else. I hated that 0 year stuff.
Yeah.
The same thing we complained about with Night Terrors. It's just an interruption to the story to pop in a quick, oh, where have they been issue.
The 0 year
Fuck
felt
that.
yeah, it felt like a band-aid to explain the 5 years.
Yeah.
Because people were still a year and were like, this doesn't make any sense. How do you have this many Robins?
I particularly liked the 0 year stuff because it was the first time I've ever seen that. I'm like, they're going backwards.
Baby's
It was
first
Holy
gimmick.
shit!
Baby's first gimmick.
Yeah. I was like, oh my god, what is all of this backstory? Cool.
Mind you, Avengers versus X-Men was dreadful. Like, to me, that was really bad. I was so annoyed by it. I couldn't believe how the creatives involved were able to deliver such a turd. But that aside, the book sold like hotcakes, and it really helped Marvel get back on their feet. Marvel now, in conjunction with this and some of the other things that they were doing, really pushed Marvel back into pole position, and they really wouldn't lose that spot ever again. You can say it was because of the movies. You can attribute it to whatever you want. I think the concept of the Avengers and the X-Men going head to head was something that at the time was novel, especially to readers who had started reading comics in the 2000s. There wasn't such an event before, so it drew people in. I bought every single issue, and there were, I think, 12 of them plus the tie-ins, and I couldn't stand this, but it was new.
It was an Axel Alonso initiative, right, at Marvel? The Marvel Now stuff?
Whoever it was.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, so whenever sales start to wane, whenever things start to go bad, there are changes that get made, right? I'm going to refer to Dan DiDio, the star of our presentation, who had some things to say about the sales and how DC reacted. So this is coming from the great Polygon retrospective that they did with a lot of creators and people, Dan one among them. The downside of success is a level of, I don't want to use the word arrogance because that's wrong, but the sense of bravado. Now I got it. Now I can prove anything. One of our staples at the beginning was we wouldn't let any book go under 20,000 sales. Okay, so that's why you saw cancellations at 8 months. Because while the books were making money, they were profitable, they just didn't hit this artificial number that was created. What we didn't realize at the time is we created the churn, as I called it. Remember that phrase, churn. There are going to be 8 books or so that are just going to come in below our target number. So what you should do is you find the best 8 and stick with them. But if you cancel and replace them, you find out that you were getting even more diminishing returns. Then all of a sudden, the 8 books below our target number become 10. And then you're filling more holes than you have ways to fill them. You get so focused on churn of the bottom, you're not focused on maintaining the success at the top. There was a level of inconsistency in the storytelling. As I explained, we did a lot of planning up front to get the New 52 launch. So when you look at the 6 months, the first 6 months, I'll tell you honestly, some of the best books DC put out during my time were there. Just really powerful, wonderful storytelling at the top. Then what happened is the schedule starts to get to you, and we start to make some tweaks and changes along the way, and your own success gets in your way. You don't spend the same amount of time and energy getting it right to the rules of what the New 52 was and the proper introduction and how things work and making the changes to the characters valuable. It's like I said, the first few months of the New 52, gangbusters. I would say, personally, a lot of the books weren't great. Some of them were really great. But when you talk about canceling books that are hitting that 20K marker, today, it would probably be somewhere around, like a strong cancellation point would probably be somewhere around 12K, 12 to maybe 15K. So he's canceling books at 20K that he says were profitable and that today would be a pretty decent number.
Yeah.
And that idea to cut them at that regardless, the fact that you have to go back and plug in those holes, like he said, right? That means you have to introduce an audience to a newer character, a new book. It's a different title, versus maintaining the pool of people that you have and working to improve the books. Because I'm sure it's a better investment to get better talent onto a title than maybe to cancel and replace the entirety of that, because at least you have an audience that's built in with the potential to grow versus having to start from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that is a very frustrating strategy, to just cull books at an arbitrary number. If they're profitable, why would you get rid of them? Especially when you understand the way that comics operate. So at the big two, generally, books like Batman, books like Spider-Man, Avengers if it's hot, whatever the hot books are, they're sort of anchors that help keep everything else afloat. If Batman is selling in the 200K range, that means that you can afford to keep around a book that's doing maybe 15K or whatever, because Batman is making up for it. That's generally the way it works. You can justify the books selling at the lower end because the higher end is propping everything up. A rising tide raises all boats type of idea within the structure of these companies. So why was Dan choosing to do this? It feels to me personally like trial by fire. Like, you're either going to keep the sales of your books high or we're going to cut them type thing.
Oh, the En Sabanur method.
It's frustrating. And so what were the cut books? Blackhawks, Hawk and Dove, Men of War, Mr. Terrific, Olmec, and Static Shock were all dumped.
Ooh, rest in peace, Static Shock.
Yeah. Within the first 8 issues.
Was Mr. Terrific even a launch title?
Yes.
It was. Okay.
So
Olmec was his title too.
Yeah.
So he wasn't being choosy.
I feel like that happened a lot with his titles too. Like his title, like he would write a book and it wouldn't last that long
because he sucked.
As a writer, he wasn't it, unfortunately. So Static and Mr. Terrific represented the losses of 2 out of the 3 books that were led by a black character. Because we had those 2, and then we had Batwing, which would survive the initial purge. Luckily for that title. Now, what if I told you that, well, I know it for Static Shock. Let me make sure of it for Mr. Terrific. I'll say what I was going to say, and then I'll correct myself if I'm wrong about it. Neither book is written by a black person. So let me see. So I know about the first book I mentioned. Eric Wallace wrote Mr. Terrific. Let's see. What is Eric Wallace? I can't find anything on Eric Wallace. Okay, Eric Wallace is black. So thankfully, they got one black guy in the mix. One black made it through. But yeah. So they cut his book, they cut Static Shock. Hawk and Dove's gone. These books are cooked. To be replaced in May of 2012 by Dial H, Earth 2. We also got GI Combat and World's Finest. I don't really know if those are the books to replace these underperformers, but okay.
What was World's Finest at this point? Like, what kind of book was it? It had to have been a
Uh,
Batman Superman book, right?
It's Huntress
Oh.
and
Power Girl.
Oh,
I actually remember it now. Yep.
Yeah, it was. It was somehow it was another
Yep.
Earth 2 Huntress and Power Girl title.
That somehow felt like pre-New 52.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
crazy.
The thing about Dial H is that its original run is like a cult classic. It's like widely beloved, or it was widely beloved at the time. So like there's a pretty good basis that a Dial H book would sell in the New 52, because it's just like, well, throw it out there.
yeah.
These people will eat it up. Compared to a Static Shock or a Mr. Terrific, I mean, certainly better than OMAC, but
They also got China Melville to write Dial H at the time, who was a pretty well-known novelist.
okay.
So there was some
Right.
celebrity recognition, quote unquote.
And I was just looking this up for our New 52 top 5 we're going to be doing later, but they have Brian Ballin covers too.
Mm-hmm.
They were gorgeous.
Yeah, pretty hot.
Ray Mescalado says, was Vibe a New 52 title?
Yes.
No. Was it?
Yes, it was.
Eventually,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay.
Came out of, I want to say, was it the Justice League of America
Yep. Came out of that
versus the Justice League? Yeah.
Trinity War era.
Yeah. Yep.
William Cobb says, did New 52 have any Asian or Hispanic led books or creators? Oof.
Led. Vibe was Hispanic,
was,
wasn't
yeah.
he?
He was,
Yeah.
yeah. He is, yeah.
Oh, listen, he's not around anymore.
For the sake of the initial, like where we are in our story, the first 2 years, I don't think so. I don't think
Just
so.
Blue Beetle.
maybe.
No, the Blue Beetle was around at the time.
Okay.
It was Reyes.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't have a lot of Ted Cord for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, unbelievable. So let's talk about what happened when things started to go awry from a sales standpoint. Let's talk about why things started to go awry and what was happening behind the scenes. I'm going to turn to a tremendous series of articles that I found produced by Multiversity Comics. They did a series of interviews with writers who took part in the New 52. And this one that I'm going to refer to now is from somebody you guys will know very well named Ron Marz. Ron Marz has done a lot of like Top Cow stuff. He's obviously made the rounds with the big two as well. A veteran, certainly, of the comic book industry. Now, Ron Marz at the time was working on Voodoo. He was tasked with writing the Voodoo title. And I'm going to refer to him now because he has an interesting story to tell that will give you an idea of the level of dysfunction that was happening during the New 52. Question: when did you realize that your vision and DC's vision were not aligned on this title? Ron Marz. The day that issue 1 came out. I was on a train headed into the city to do a signing at Midtown Comics for Voodoo #1. And I got a call from the editor, Brian. This is Brian Cunningham, who we know. He's the guy that got us in touch with Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep. And Brian's like, hey, can you come into the office today? And I'm like, well, no, I can't because I'm on my way to the signing. He was going to a Midtown Comics signing. Previously, I had offered, hey, do you want me to swing by the office to kick around ideas and stuff? I can hop in an earlier train and come in and then go to the signing. And they said, no, we've got so much going on. We really don't have time for that. So the day that the book came out, I got a call saying, can you come into the office? That's not a good call to get. And now I can't because I would miss the signing. I said, what's going on? And so it was relayed to me that the book went up the chain and the editor in chief, who at the time was Bob Harris, doesn't know who to root for in the book. And I was like, right? That's exactly it. And they're like, yeah, but we don't think that's a good idea. And obviously, I've known Bob for years, and I have no issues with Bob whatsoever. My suspicion is that my actual pitch never made it to Bob's desk.
Damn.
So my whole intention of, I don't know whether she's a hero or a villain, never made it to the editor-in-chief. So when the book came out and his reaction was, I don't know if she's a hero or a villain, everyone did their job, but the jobs were now suddenly diametrically opposed.
Wow. Imagine being like, just go to get a stand, pick up the book. It's like, yeah, who let this by? This is published now. What's going on? Like that's so far down the production lane at that point. You goofed hard if that's the thing. But also, well, I guess you're the editor in chief. You get say, huh?
In 52 Comics, I guess alphabetically, Voodoo's the last one. He just didn't get there.
Yeah.
He's then asked, is it surprising to you that the editor-in-chief of the line doesn't read an issue until it's on the stands? No. I mean, when you're launching 52 books at once, no. There's a lot of stuff that goes on, and the focal point is the editor-in-chief, that chair, and there's a lot that person has to do. So if you look back at the issues, there's no first-person narration in the first one. It's just told more cinematically. But starting with issue 2, there's a first-person narration, which was the edict that came down from editorial. It was sort of narration for the purpose of narration, which was odd to me because once you start a book in a certain narrative fashion, I think you should continue that. So that was an odd thing to me. So in the 4 issues, I had 3 different editors on the book because people kept leaving staff while the book kept getting shuffled around, which again, obviously that's nobody's fault. That's just what happens. Each of the editors had sort of been thrown into this thing at the last minute to try to sort out what it was. So, they printed 4 of my issues. The 5th one never got done. And the 6th one, I think I was halfway through writing it. I think, and to their credit, DC actually paid me for the 6th issue. Obviously, a decision had been made. They wanted somebody else. They wanted a fresh take on the book. That's their prerogative. I felt bad just because it was, I was pretty upfront with this, that this was the kind of book I'm thinking of doing. This is what it is. But ultimately, that notion never got to the editor-in-chief level. So when the book came out, there was surprise there. Also, a week or 2 before Voodoo came out, Red Hood and the Outlaws came out. And Starfire's portrayal in that book was seen as sort of sexually exploitative. Frankly, I don't think I ever read the issue. But enough people objected that I'm sure the criticism was deserved. But the fact that that book came out and quite a bit of grief for being misogynistic, there was now a lot of focus on Voodoo because of the stripper aspect, which again was the one aspect they said you have to do. So the Voodoo character, going back to her early days, was a stripper. That was her occupation. And DC told Ron that he had to include that as a part of her New 52 origin, even though he wasn't necessarily keen on doing it. He found a clever way to pull it off. She's like a stripper, but she works near a military base, and she's getting secrets from the military base because the soldiers are coming into the strip club. But she was a stripper. And I already told you guys about the 1% of women that are writing DC books at this time and how angry people were about misogyny. So here comes Voodoo trotting out with a stripper as its main character. People were hot about it. He says, so overall, I think it was a cool idea, the New 52. Generally, most cool ideas are not always executed as gracefully as you want them to be. But, when you do 52 new titles, some of them are going to be gems and some of them are going to be stinkers, and a lot of them are going to be somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. Ron's book was handed off to somebody else. He was dumped from the title. And the new creative team would go on to retcon what Ron did. So the next 4 issues or whatever retconned what Ron did in the previous 4.
Amin says that the writer that replaced him was Joshua Williamson.
Funny that. crazy.
That definitely means that somewhere through the line between the editor in chief and whatever number of editors until Ron, they weren't aligned, and so Ron suffers the consequence of that because surely they would have had to have some sort of conversation, some sort of communication to say, this is the ultimate goal. This is what I need the stable of writers that you have to be doing. This is sort of the direction, or at the very least, when it comes to some sort of narrative function, this is what needs to work.
And Voodoo always felt like an odd choice for the initial launch for me, because it really felt like a choice that was like, hey, remember we also have Wildstorm. It was with Stormwatch and Grifter, and Stormwatch had Martian Manhunter thrown in the mix. And it always felt like, okay, sure, that's fine. But it definitely does seem like I don't expect the editor-in-chief to read every 52 of these books, but the fact that there was such a huge narrative change between issues 1 and 2 with the way the storytelling is, like that seems like an immediate change. Like I feel like the script for 1, like we wouldn't even be in print yet before the script for 2 came in, you know? Like I feel like that's just an unnecessary change really that quickly.
I don't know. I sort of feel like the editor in chief should be able to, if you ask them at least what each individual book is about,
Yeah.
they could
Sure. Yeah.
give you the elevator pitch, right?
Yeah.
Like,
there's
I
no
argue
way the editor-in-chief doesn't read the pitch, know the pitch. You don't know whether the main character in one of your published books is good or bad.
minimum. Like,
And you're launching the entirety of a new series, right? There has to be some sort of due diligence to be able to have continuity there. Wild.
It's ridiculous. DV says you're going to talk about George Perez's Superman run, right? We actually talked about that last week, where George was really frustrated by the fact that he couldn't get clear-cut answers on almost any question he had about, where are the Kents? What's up with Superman and Lois? All these questions he had, he couldn't get an answer to because he was writing the modern Superman while Grant was writing the 5 years prior Superman. And Grant's story would inform the facts of Superman's life that George would need to pull from, but Grant wasn't playing ball and telling anybody what would be happening. So that's the story on that. And then George would end up leaving the book. I think 6 issues in, George left. Carson K says, then what editor read them? Whoever the editor was, but the problem is, I mean, there were 3 editors in 4 issues, so that's crazy. But whatever editor read it thought it was fine. The problem is that it never reached the point of the editor-in-chief. So and that person didn't think it was fine. Bob Harris's whims dictated this was not fine. And I think if you're not going to trust your creators to do what you hired them to do, then you should know what they're doing so that you can correct it before they do it. That's what I would say.
to that point, you should probably also read their pitch.
Yeah. Exactly. It's crazy. There are a lot of stories like this, and I read every interview I could find. I slavishly edited these down and read through them. So many stories of this nature, and it's frustrating. I wish I could read them all. I can't. We'd be here for 17 hours.
I mean,
but
we're
there
gonna
are
anyway.
there are a lot of stories of this nature.
Amin Perez actually resubbed on YouTube membership as a VI pal, but in the resub he mentioned, I remember in Johns' Justice League, Clark mentions having nightmares of Pa Kent dying of a heart attack, but Morrison established that Kent died in a car accident.
Well, yeah, he was in a car accident, but that's not what killed him. It was a heart attack after the car accident. Thanks, Amin, for being a member for 7 months. If you guys want to be a member of our channel, you get access to cool perks like early access to our videos, which you guys have been watching a lot of lately. You get to watch those early. You get your your green name in the chat, and of course, you get those sweet pals heads. While we are discussing it, I do want to say a huge shout out and thank you to David Melendez Doria, who decided to join the Palsverse today.
Hey.
Did it
Whoa.
right when we started the stream. So thank you so much, David. You can expect your Palsverse origin here impending. We've got a backlog to get through. You guys have been joining up at a record rate. Thank you so much for that. And I also want to thank Adam Smith, who upgraded his membership to become a Palsverse legend. So that's the highest honor. That's the highest point of integration with us. So thank you both so much. Really appreciate that. If you guys want to join the Palsverse as well and support us in that way, you can head on over to patreon.com/thecomicspals and do that. I'll be shouting out all of you who do that a little bit later on. If you'll indulge me, I really want to share the story of Francis Manapul.
Please do.
Because Francis Manapul was writing The Flash at the time. And if you guys will remember, he had drawn The Flash previously with Jeff Johns. He was a part of Jeff Johns' Flash run at some point. And was jumping into the New 52. Jeff moved on. Jeff didn't want to do it anymore. But Francis really loved The Flash. And so what DC did was they said, okay, hey, look, we really want you to stay on the book. Would you be interested in writing the book? And that was enough to get Francis to say yes, despite Jeff leaving. He was like, hey, I want to stretch my legs creatively. I want to write. Let's give it a shot. This is Francis Manapul from the Multiversity Comics interview. At one point, I almost left the Flash book. At the beginning of the New 52, we literally had a form, like a 2 or 3 page questionnaire that we had to answer for every issue, and everyone hated it. So it was like, what event in this issue changes everything? There were literally bullet points of things we needed to hit. And you know, when you're writing an arc, you can't do that because it leads to unearned moments, right? You can't have a life-altering thing every issue. That's impossible. We really struggled with that because, I mean, we could answer those questions for the arc, but we couldn't answer those questions for every single issue. It was impossible. It led us to really rushing a lot of stories because there were beats that they wanted, but they wanted each issue to be very action-packed. They wanted it to be snappy. But the thing is, I know in the past, they were able to accomplish this, and to the credit of the creators of the process, they're able to get so much with so few pages. But me personally and Brian Bucalato, we found it difficult to make you care about something and then quickly pull it away from you, to make you feel that loss within only one issue. I can't make you care. I can't make you care about Patty Spivot in one issue. I need an arc. Now, keep in mind, in the initial press release of The Flash, a lot of people were expecting the events of Flashpoint to be referenced in our book. And DC fans, whether begrudgingly or excitingly, had to read The Flash because they thought they needed to read that to understand what's happening, and it made sense for The Flash to be the carryover book. So the numbers for first issue were phenomenal. As we discussed, the first issue of Flash was 129K sold. But we knew it wasn't sustainable. Like, The Flash held a certain number that wasn't like Batman numbers. It was a middling title, and it always had been, even when I was a fan. When the sales started to kind of go down a bit, and mind you, everybody's sales were going down because everything was starting to stabilize. I think Dan DiDio was starting to panic. And he's like, hey, we need snappier. Introduce the rogues faster. Give them superpowers. Let's hit them with something. And I was like, dude, we're only 3 issues in. Let us finish this arc. And we got into this whole argument where they're like, well, you know, maybe we need to bring in another writer. And it was a real blow. As more or less the first-time writer, my confidence was tanking. I was like, man, I'm a failure. So I wrote this email to Dan and Jim. And I said, hey, guys, you know, sorry, I lost myself. There we go. Hey, guys, you know, this has been a really tough process. I am very open to changing things. I'm not a difficult person to work with by any means, but you have to allow us the room to breathe and tell the stories that we're getting to. And we'll get to what you wanted us to get to, but we need to earn those moments. I basically ended the email with saying, I put my trust in you as a company by signing this contract for the next couple of years of my life. And if I'm willing to give my trust to you, you need to give me your trust. Otherwise, I quit. And they're like, don't quit. Everything's cool. Keep going. And this was the first arc. This is like the middle of the first arc.
In my memory, like I remember that being a well-regarded title, too.
I loved it.
I did too. It could be the art. The art, is what really, really sticks out to me about it. But maybe he's right in that people thought Flashpoint stuff was going to carry over, and if that were the case, surely you wouldn't put a new writer on that title.
I was frustrated reading through this because, like you guys and like the chat is saying, I thought Flash was awesome at this point in time. This Manapul run, I remember very, very fondly. And maybe I'm misremembering, but I thought I loved it.
It was always the biggest buzz, I feel like, in the stores in a given week. I wasn't reading it, but I remember being like absorbing the stories through the conversation that was being had, because I remember it being a huge title. Lot of people had a lot of love for it.
They must have been taking some heat in the background and pushing through to make it something good.
Yeah.
Well, Francis was asked, was it more smooth sailing after that? And Francis said, I think the big thing that really got them off our backs is when the first trade came out and it did really, really well. And I remember Dan messaging me and said, all of our other movies or our other TV shows never moved the needle on any of our trades. But when the Flash TV show came out, your book went up with it. So the TV show definitely helped, but that was also them patting themselves on the back a bit, in that with the New 52 being such a clean slate. I'll be honest. One of the things that really drove me off the book was that I was like, at this point, the better part of my 20s and 30s were spent on the Flash. I drew the Flash for a year with Jeff. I wrote and drew the Flash with Brian for another 4 years. At that age, that's a big chunk of my life. And I felt like if I'm going to dedicate even more time to this book, I'd really like to bring in some of the characters that I love. And when I couldn't, I was just like, okay, I think I'm done, To be honest, I am still very pissed off that as soon as I left, they brought Wally back. And I remember asking, like, what the fuck, man? How come you couldn't let me bring him back? That ate at me, And what they said was, we were afraid that when you left, sales would drop. So we needed to do something. And I was like, if you gave me Wally, maybe the sales would have gone up. I think that was the beginning where it felt like things were much more reactionary rather than proactive. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't the right guy to do it. I know that Dan has this sort of rule where sometimes he doesn't like creators who have too much reverence for certain characters, which, I don't know. I mean, that works pretty well for Jeff, who greatly loves every one of these characters. I think when you look at the decisions being made at that time, it makes sense at that time, So that's why it's hard to really play Monday morning quarterback with all this stuff. At that time, they thought those were the right decisions. When asked what he thinks about Dan and his overall experience, he said, I think Dan hits the mark on when things need to change. He has an amazing instinct for when things need to shift. But much like the first arc of the book, sometimes the execution falters on the idea because everything starts getting rushed. And like for me, even just from a practical standpoint, no Flash, no house. The Flash was transformative for me financially. It was transformative. In terms of the fan base, I felt like it rejuvenated and gave me a much younger fan base than I was used to.
I do like the idea that it wasn't selling enough, but once Manapul's off of it, he was the reason it was selling. So they need to do a pop. Like, I don't know, recognize what you have when you have it.
Well, it
But
wasn't, not, and I don't say this to knock Manapul because what he was doing was working, but to DiDio, 3 issues in, it wasn't working.
But 3 issues in, like
Yeah, no,
yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
We
Uh,
give
uh,
more leeway to comics on Palsverse.
Well, you do.
And also, we all know if you're a regular comics reader who's sort of tapped into the numbers, you know that things go down.
Yeah.
And I told you guys earlier,
Yeah.
I was specific about the numbers of Flash because I knew I would get to this. Yes, it had dropped 50,000 units sold from September to, I think I referenced
December.
December. That's a huge amount, but it's the Flash. And it's not Jeff Johns anymore. So what can you expect?
And if audiences thought it was going to carry over Flashpoint stuff, like that would be a crazy drop.
Yeah.
It was still selling in the top 20, by the way.
Yeah.
And that's even that, because you have such an uphill battle. I feel like you should even take the sales that you have with that much more grain of salt, because that all of those factors are working against Manapul, and he still managed to at least get the baseline that he had built.
Sean, if it was selling in the top 20, were other books in the top 20 also being told to shift 3 issues in? Or did the Flash have more weight on it because it's the Flash?
Oh man. Dude, I just told you about Voodoo having 3 editors and 4 issues. Ron Marz getting kicked off the title before he could even finish out an arc.
Yeah.
There are so many stories like that.
Snyder in his class talked about having a drag out fight with the editors at DC, and Capullo saying, "Hold your ground. I'll go down with you. Fuck them."
Hell yeah.
Capullo would do that.
Yeah.
I have that story.
Okay. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Do you have a story about Rob Liefeld?
Yeah. I told you guys, I teased last week, we're going to talk about the fight that Scott Snyder and Rob Liefeld had.
I'm excited for that because once you said like Hawk and Dove was one of those ones cut first, and I was like, oh, I remember something happening there, because that was a Liefeld book.
DV said he meaning Dan DiDio was not a patient dude and was not into letting things play out naturally. That seems to have changed in the recent administration. Yeah. So Dan DiDio, I already talked about his philosophy, which was to cut and cull and churn the bottom 8 books, the books that were selling at or below the 20,000 threshold, which is an arbitrary number. Books selling at that number were still viable and still profitable, but Dan just wanted to get rid of them just to change. With the Flash, I think Dan's expectations were high because the success of the run that Jeff had was still fresh in his mind. And I also think he saw Flash as one of the big 7, which he is, and that book should stand alongside books like Green Lantern at the very least and be able to sell within the top 10. The problem is that the books that sold in the top 10 at this point all had a superstar writer on them. All of them. Or David Finch, who is a superstar artist that people were super excited to see write. The only other one was Batman and Green Lantern, which are written by Snyder and Jeff Johns.
And also carried over continuity.
Exactly. It's almost unfair to compare any of the other New 52 titles to those two because they had the same continuity, which means they had the exact same baked-in readership on top of bringing in new readers due to the new initiative. It's not fair. But who was going to tell Jeff Johns no? Who was going to say to Jeff or Grant, because Grant comes in later and continues their continuity with Batman Inc. But who was going to say, yeah, you're going to have to reboot that and start from scratch? It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Do you guys think it should have happened?
Yes. 1000%. Sorry, Jeff. Sorry, Grant. We just rebooted the whole universe. fuck off, I guess.
Well, Jeff was able to do it Justice League. You know, which Green Lantern was in.
Yeah. I think for me, it's just it's that 5-year gap. You know, if you can't get all of those things that happened in a 5-year gap, I think Green Lantern made more sense. You know, you can toss aliens in there, and there's a bunch of more reasonable explanations to what Hal was doing and what the Green Lanterns were going through in that 5 years or whatever. But I think when you're dealing with the lives of humans, the way Snyder and Grant were, you have a lot more to contend with because that time is measured. You know, Dick can't go from Robin to Nightwing and have that full career in 5 years. If he starts as as Robin at best at 10, you're still looking at a 16-year-old, right? Like,
Doesn't make any sense. Damian Wayne was 10 years old.
yep.
It's also just overcomplicating things for your writers. Or editors, too. Having to figure out those puzzle pieces or explain it away on social media somewhere.
And I'm sorry, it just shows cowardice. You know, maybe it would have been bad for the sales, but you know, there's not a something that says the new 52 altogether is going to be great for sales either.
Get Shitty answers a question that Brian Adkins had. That's why the initial retcon with Dr. Manhattan was, no, it's actually 10 years. You only remember 5. Right. It definitely was 5 years at first. That's why Justice League and Action start 5 years before the rest of the books. That 5 years represents basically the beginning of superheroics in the New 52's DC. So Batman was definitely 5 years into his career.
3 Robins, a son.
Yeah.
4 Robins, sorry, 4 Robins, one of them being his son.
10-year-old
15
son.
Batgirls, an African spinoff.
I think they should have just started from 1. As much as I don't even know that they should have done the New 52, but this, accepting that they did it, I think starting from 1 cures a lot of the ills that they had with those 2 books.
And I think that's kind of why I'm excited for Absolute coming up, because it starts from 1 for those 3 main titles. But I don't know if I'm excited for it because I have the context of the New 52 in my head. Either way, I agree. I think they should have started like full-on reboot for everything.
Yeah. And you know what? No Robins, no problem. Not no Robins, but a Robin. You know, you lose a lot of things in the interim of that. Like you do lose Nightwing, you know, you lose Batgirl, you lose so much, but
You also gain the chance to invigorate those characters in a modern context.
right. And it's not like other series didn't lose people.
Yeah.
Wally was gone. Wally was unpersoned. He was gone. There were a lot of characters that were gone. Didn't his name is Roy Harper, right? He
Yeah,
had a
Speedy.
whole family that was gone.
Damn.
Leanne Harper, all that, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, we got 100 people here. Thank you so much for that. Make sure you
Whoa.
smash that like button. I really,
Smash.
Ayo.
really say thank you to everybody for tuning in. Hopefully you guys are still rocking with us and enjoying this trip down memory lane with the New 52. I have a lot more creators to refer to because, man, there's just so many interesting stories that, you know, you wouldn't believe. Things started to get really bad behind the scenes. It was just nasty business. I'm going to read a quote that I got from the Polygon article. It is anonymous. It is not attributed to any person. I do not know who this was, but this is what it says. One writer who asked not to be named in this article described their experience with editorial on one title as, quote, a complete nightmare, adding that their direct editor was, quote, the worst editor I have ever worked with. He literally rearranged the page order after the art had been finished, not to tell the same story in a different way, but to complete a completely different story, which I then had to write dialogue for and follow up with something that made even slight sense in an already prepared second issue. He was one of those guys who felt he was a genius and that his every idea had enormous merit, and he was completely wrong about that.
Oh,
Damn, scathing.
Brutal.
I like to imagine the pages were like moved over. It's a fight scene. Everyone's all beat up and bloody. The next one, everyone's just like all well done. Still hair is still in place. All that kind of shit.
It's clear to me, and it should be clear to you guys by now, that editorial was a mess. That they didn't know what they were doing. People were being shuffled around all over the place. You know, multiple editors per book, which is just nuts.
Yeah.
And because of that, a lot of things fell through the cracks. Here's a great example. The Teen Titans. I did a lot of research into this because I didn't read the Titans in the New 52. I think I bought the first issue, but I quickly realized what it was, and I was like, I got to get out of here. So I didn't know anything about it.
lucky.
Aha, there you go. Come to find out, the New 52 Teen Titans is lauded as arguably one of the worst Titans runs of all time.
Yikes.
Yeah.
I decided now, with my modern brain, to read it again.
Uh-oh.
I got through 2.5 issues, and I decided I needed to step away.
The brain felt a little itchy. Yeah.
Sean said, oh, I need to burn down somebody's house.
So here are a couple Titans facts that should help illustrate what it is that I am saying. Here is a direct quote from Titans issue, I believe it's issue 2, and it is Cassie Sandsmark saying this to Tim Drake. Cassie, as established in this very same book, is 17 years old. Keep that in mind. The panel is us. She's looking at us. We are essentially Tim Drake in this moment, as she says to Tim as they're sitting down having a conversation. Yo, up here. And before you ask, yes, they're real.
What the fuck?
She's talking about her gauntlets, right? Her cuffs.
Yeah, surely. The material on her superhero costume.
Yikes.
And mind you, that's the second boob joke in as many titles across as many issues.
Oh, there are a lot more. There are a lot more. Red Hood and the Outlaws is crazy.
Yeah.
The stuff they were doing with Starfire is nuts. But think about what I just said. Editorial allowed a writer, Scott Lobdell, to
You gotta say his name.
to put in their book, a Teen Titans book, a joke about a 17-year-old girl's breasts, and she says they're real. Yes, because obviously never mind. There are a ton of teenagers walking around with breast implants. That needed to be defined. Thank you so much. That's what I needed to know. Disgusting.
You send your teen out to be a superhero. You don't hear from them. They come back. Breast implants. Horrible.
Vile. That's the worst of it, but there are some other sins. This book is unsure of whether or not there have ever been other versions of the Teen Titans.
Yep.
What?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
This is supposed to be the ground floor. This is the beginning of everything. So why is it that there are direct references to other iterations of the Teen Titans within the first 2 issues of the book. This is a direct line of dialogue. Quote, this is Tim Drake. I can't believe I'm thinking this, but this was so the shortest incarnation of the Teen Titans ever. That's a line of dialogue from the book that he's thinking about as he's about to die. It gets worse. Because that line isn't collected in trade. They deleted that line of dialogue. They deleted pieces of the initial issues that reference prior iterations of the Teen Titans.
Classic Dr. Dan Hatton.
Was that just like not caught by editorial? Like
No, I think it was just how it was that thing of like nobody knew what this was.
Yeah, I remember Red and the Outlaw, Starfire had memory loss. Like she remembered that she used to do something, but couldn't remember what it was, and she remembered she might have had a history with Dick Grayson, but not sure how.
Yep. Yeah, don't forget that you know, we talked last time about how 6 months before it happened, Scott Snyder didn't even know that he was going to be leading with Batman.
Right, yeah.
You know, so I don't think anybody even knew what it was yet.
Can you imagine at what point some of the other writers were brought in? Hey, Peter Milligan, you gotta knock out 2 issues. When's it that? If you can, next week, dude.
Like yesterday?
Yeah.
I was blown away. Absolutely stricken by this.
Do you get it now? Do you get it?
Scary Harpy in the chat says, a nice name, by the way. Writers did not know the continuity because editors did not know the continuity because DiDio did not know the continuity.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't a continuity. It's from scratch, supposedly.
It should have been, yeah. But then how do you explain Nightwing? Like, you get to so many issues with that. Because, like, then you'd have to say Nightwing was never a Teen Titan. Well, can't do that. People get mad.
Oh, I mean, even Swamp Thing, like, post the search for it, he's talking to Superman. He's like, oh, wasn't there a different me before? Wasn't I in a different body?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unreal. We talked about the cancellation of Static Shock. Let's
Whoa,
hear
what
from...
did he do? Is it a tweet? What's up? Yo, my man's on the outs. Hold on a second. Let's talk about that.
Be your own man sometimes.
I just got hit by a truck.
Oh my God. Let's hear from the writer, quote unquote, of Static Shock, John Rozum. All respect to John Rozum. John Rozum probably wasn't the right person to be given the task of writing Static Shock. But we'll never really know that because, according to John, he didn't get to write the book anyway. Here are John's words. Actually, before I get to John's words, I culled this in such a way that context is needed. John Rozum was hired to write Static Shock, and almost from the word go, he was saddled with a person named Scott McDaniel, who was a writer-artist who basically took over the book. So here's John's words. To say I was disappointed with how things turned out is an understatement. From the first issue on, I was essentially benched by Harvey Richards, his editor, and artist-writer Scott McDaniel. All of my ideas and suggestions were met with disdain, and Scott McDaniel lectured me on how my method for writing was wrong because I wasn't following the Robert McKee screenwriting book he told him was the way to do things. Actually, it's a very good book, Story by Robert McKee.
Is that the guy that's in Adaptation with Nicolas Cage, too? It's a screenwriter as a character. Good movie.
All of my ideas... Oh, yeah, okay, I already said that. The man who'd never written anything was suddenly more expert than me, and the editor was agreeing with him. Scott had also never read a Static Shock book. nor seen the cartoon series, yet was telling me that my dialogue didn't sound true to the character and he would fix it. It was a miserable experience, which I tried to weather professionally and see if I could turn back into my favor, but that never worked. I was also determined to stick with it out of loyalty to Dwayne McDuffie, hoping that I could fix what was going very wrong with this series. I even voiced my unhappiness with Harvey Richards, who promised me that the situation would change. When I received an email from Harvey telling me that he and Scott had been plotting out the series without me, after Harvey had promised me that I'd be back in the driver's seat as the writer, I'd had enough and quit. The experience as a whole was incredibly stressful, and I became physically ill just seeing an email in my mailbox from either Harvey or Scott. I was stunned by how unprofessionally I was treated by my editor, with whom I'd previously had nothing but a positive working relationship with for the bulk of my career in comics, and by Scott McDaniel, who seemed like a nice, professional, or personable guy, and the interactions he's had with his fans that I've read would indicate really he is one. My negative experience was exclusively with these two people and not with anyone else at DC Comics or DC as a whole. As I said, no one knew any of this was happening until I quit and let the executives at DC know why. Anyone who wants to believe that my experience was some general policy at DC would be wrong to think that. Bob Harris, Jeff Johns, Dan DiDio, and Jim Lee did not tell Harvey Richards to reject all my contributions on this. Harvey decided that himself. All of my other experiences with a variety of people at DC going back to the 90s have always been overwhelmingly positive. Again, they handled the decision once I quit rather well.
That's rough too, because Rozum wrote for Milestone, so he probably had a relationship with McDuffie too.
Yes, he definitely did.
So having that, stolen is the only word I could think of. Stolen for him, but also nobody can really know that it was stolen from him. It was like like kind of anguish only he could really see. That's rough. Yeah. That sucks.
Well, I feel like more as we talk about this more and more, there was such a drop on the editorial side, on the people who make up the back end work of all of this, from communication to clarity to direction. I can now only imagine the notes like artists got, writers for sure from like a larger construction perspective, but even the artists themselves on the smallest of things, like, maybe this person's mask isn't on the right way, but do you have knowledge onto those things?
You're driving me crazy because now you're making me want to go and dig up other articles that I cut out because I was trying to be timely, but there are a lot of examples of what you're talking about. There's a guy named hopefully I can find it. He was the artist on Wonder Woman that's not Cliff Chiang. Tony Akins.
Okay.
He talked about how the notes that he received were stuff like, oh, you need to make Wonder Woman look more attractive. You need to make her prettier. Mind you, he's the guy they would bring in to draw the parts where she was battling and the really like gory stuff and that kind of thing. And they're telling this guy who's drawing that she doesn't look good enough. Like her appearance, she's not hot enough. What the fuck?
That's kind of subjective too, like
Yeah,
hot for the editor maybe.
And also I felt like Cliff Chang's work was also very just generally flattering. Like it wasn't sexualized. It was just a person. It was just a good rendering of a character, strong, confident, removed from the sexuality to some degree.
He took her pants off for pre-52. She had the pants, but yeah, no, I agree. It wasn't like it was a woman wearing it, not really overly sexualized. Like the shots weren't specifically to accentuate certain features. Yeah.
It's crazy. I have so many notes. Let me just hit. I'm gonna just bang out a few of these, not long form stuff. Just Justin Jordan, who did Luther Strode. That's what he's famous for. But throughout his time with the New 52, he worked on Deathstroke, Superboy, Green Lantern, New Guardians. He said some of it was miserable and some of it was awesome. That's what he said. He had a lot of other things to say, but that's the quote I have from him. Mike Costa said, I was literally told we don't know if there is kryptonite in the New 52. That's insane.
What? Krypton blew up, right?
Who knows? Who knows? Dan DiDio was described as abrasive and mercurial by someone who chose to remain anonymous. Here's a great one. This is a do I have it? I hope I have it. Damn. I don't think I have it. I'll get back to it. They're Bleeding Cool essentially put out an anonymous form, basically, that some DC creators actually filled out. And it was because they had heard so many reports of mistreatment of creators at DC at this time that Rich Johnston wanted to give DC writers and artists an opportunity to privately, quietly talk about their experiences at DC during this time. And one of them said something to the effect of, other writers can have ideas outside of Dan DiDio. Basically just the idea that everything that they were able to do, Dan DiDio had to sign off on. Or not sign off on, but just like he had to insert himself into. And how frustrating of an experience that was.
Controlling, micromanaging, that's the worst thing you could do for on any person that you work with.
Especially creatively.
Yeah.
And for him, this is what Dan had to say. This is what Dan DiDio has said retroactively in the Polygon article about some of the ways that things went down with creators. He said, this could probably get me in trouble. When you talk to me about talent, I used to say this to people, and it used to get someone offended. I said, I don't see people when the stories are being written or drawn sometimes because I'm looking at what's engaging to me. Do I notice your name? No, I'm looking at the characters. I used to be forceful in some conversations because I was so focused on what needed to be said and done with the character story. I didn't even realize who was in a room or who I was talking to. I was just addressing the idea rather than the people.
Yes, let's dehumanize the creators for the sake of the characters.
Shocking. And this behavior didn't go unnoticed. This behavior did not go unnoticed by any means. Okay, before I get into that, I do have the quote that I wanted. So this is just crazy. The suggestion box. I love how Bleeding Cool Rich just knows how to insert himself into anything anything going on. Let's see. Editorial has a right to dictate how their lines should progress, but not at the last minute and while changing other parts. Stop trying to please all of the people all of the time and just try to tell a solid story. It is okay for someone other than Dan DiDio to have an idea. 52 books means 52 writers have been hired to write 52 books every month. That is a huge creative pool to draw from. So why does every idea have to get bottlenecked through one man? Another quote. These are all anonymous, by the way. Every editor should write a book. This way they can all be acutely aware of the pressure of a monthly schedule as well as the daily drudge of having to incorporate random and contradictory notes from editorial. Finally, just because a writer can create a story super fast doesn't mean it's super good. Give them time to craft. It's a great point.
Yep. And that ties to that the reactionary piece from earlier you were mentioning, where it looked like DC was not being proactive, was not planning, was not looking ahead. It was, hey, we had a new idea. Oh shit, that lasted 3 issues. Now what do we do?
Things got so bad that allegedly, supposedly, according to Bleeding Cool, intervention was needed. This is what Rich says. Quote, before the recent top secret DC Creative Summit, Bleeding Cool ran a suggestion box. I already talked about that. Whether it was because of that list or because of those sentiments also being expressed face to face, I don't know. But I'm told that at that summit, publisher Dan DiDio apologized to creators gathered around. With President Diane Nelson to his side, Dan DiDio admitted that there had been problems in the editorial chain, apologized for the repeated back and forth on people's scripts and art, and committed to reducing such editorial inputs once an editorial direction had been agreed upon and approved. And Diane Nelson said she would ensure this happened, which left a number of frustrated people rather happy, actually. Let's see how it plays out. This is February of 2013. So we're talking about 2 years, well, a year, almost 2 years into the New 52 experiment. This is what has happened. They had to have an all hands on deck. And one of the things that happened is Dan DiDio had to apologize to everybody for their experience thus far.
Wild. Can you imagine?
I wish I could. Go ahead.
Your boss is so shitty to absolutely everybody. He's got to have a meeting with his boss. And then he's got to come on the Zoom call and apologize to everybody.
Okay, say you're sorry.
It's absurd. It's absurd. And we haven't even talked about what happened to Gail Simone.
Oh, no.
Who hurt her?
Her 1%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened to the 1%?
The 1%.
Yeah.
So Gail Simone at the time was writing Batgirl, which was very, very highly celebrated. I remember this being in my top 5 favorite New 52 books at the time. I really, really adored this series. Now, of course, there was controversy. She did, take away the Oracle part of Batgirl, even though somehow in the 5 years, Barbara had been Oracle at some point. She had been shot by the Joker. It canonized the Killing Joke, even though this was supposed to be a fresh start. But okay, DC, have it your way. Despite all that, Batgirl was selling quite well. It was one of the better sellers among the New 52 books. But in spite of all of that, December 9th, 2012, Gail Simone sends out a tweet for the whole world to see that says, on Wednesday of last week, new Batgirl editor Brian Cunningham, the same Brian that we referenced earlier, informed me by email that I was no longer the writer of Batgirl. She was fired from a book that was successful for a reason that to this day has never been exposed. But you want to know what's crazier than that? Exactly 12 days later, Gail Simone said she was rehired on Batgirl.
What?
And despite 2 issues in the intervening time, 12 days, 2 issues would be written by another writer. After that, Gail would be back to the book that she made a success in the first place.
Who was the writer? Do you have the...
I don't have it in
Fill-in?
front of me.
Wait. 2 issues were written and put out. Were written to be put out in the 12 days. This person had to have been writing. There's no way.
So either they were
Crazy.
writing while she was already hired and they were preparing for this, or they got someone who could just churn quicker than Gale could for some reason. It's not like the book was getting delayed or anything like that, so I don't really see the real reason. But
There were no delays in the early days of the New 52 for any book. Again, Gale has never spoken on it. As far as I could ascertain, the research I did, I couldn't find the answer as to why she was fired. But there was a lot of outcry about this, and I assume her rehiring had something to do with the fact that people were really angry.
and at the time, I think they had hired more women. You said this December of 2012, right?
Yeah.
Because I think Katana's by Anna Senti. No, that might have been 2013. But I know Sword and Sorcery by Christy Marks came out in 2012. So they at least, maybe they figured, oh, no, we already have our one writer, woman writer. So we don't need Gale anymore. Until the internet was like, wait, hold on.
They sent her the wrong email. That wasn't meant for her. And then they realized 12 days later. Oh, Gail, I'm so sorry. That wasn't you. That was for Jeff Lemire. Sorry.
And shortly after, Gale gets a Secret Six revival too at DC.
And in 2012, Gail Simone is probably the most high-profile woman writer in comics.
For sure.
And she was dumped by email. They didn't care. I'm not saying that DC did this to say, fuck Gale, fuck women. I don't think it's anything like that. I just think that whatever the reasoning was, it didn't matter that Gail Simone is the most prominent woman writer. It didn't matter that Batgirl was a success. It didn't matter what the optics would be. It didn't even matter that they should have the decency to call her and tell her this. None of that mattered because DC was such a shit show at that time. Just a mess of inconsistent activity.
Shenanigans.
A couple of more titles would release in the second wave. May would see the release of Batman Incorporated. Finally, Grant Morrison joins the fray of the New 52 on the Batman side of things. And we would also get Ravagers, #1. The third wave would see 4 series canceled by their issue 0. So now we're in September of 2012. This technically being their 13th issue, so they would get the 0 and then be canceled to make room for the third wave. So the canceled series were Captain Atom, Justice League International, Resurrection Man, and Voodoo. So for all that went on with Voodoo, getting rid of Ron Marz 4 issues in, bringing on Williamson to do the rest of the series, it didn't even make it past 13 issues. But okay, DC. They were replaced by Phantom Stranger, Team 7, Sword of Sorcery, and Talon. Talon being a spin-off of Batman. Talon is the Court of Owls like hench person. Their
assassin.
Assassin,
yeah. That was a good one. Yo, Phantom Stranger was good too, actually.
Yeah. Triple Ho provides a Gail Simone quote in the chat. Okay, just to clarify, I did not get fired on Batgirl. I left the book over creative differences. Yeah, I don't know about that one.
The band went in a different direction.
I'm not saying she didn't say that. I'm just saying I don't know if I believe that is actually what happened.
For sure.
It says, rumor says she was fired due to a disagreement in how to handle female characters. But that's the most executive answer you could get. And it was, Marowak Esquiro says, Ray Fox wrote Batgirl issues 17 and 18, which would have been, and I just looked this up, that's what I was doing, were Death in the Family tie-ins.
And again, you know, we talked last week about the problem that the New 52 has had with women and that DC was having with women before a single New 52 book dropped. Now, DC, to their credit, I guess, addressed this in a a press release, I guess you could call it, that they put out to sort of quell some of the anger about the situation, where they told readers of this article that they put out through their website, "We hear you." So yeah, here it is. "We hear you." Friday, July 29th, 2011. They said, "Over the past week, we've heard from fans about a need for more women writers, artists, and characters. We want you to know, first and foremost, that we hear you and take your concerns very seriously. We've been very fortunate in recent years to have fan favorite creators like Gail Simone, Amy Reeder, Felicia Henderson, Fiona Staples, Amanda Connor, G. Willow Wilson, and Nicola Scott write and draw the adventures of the world's greatest superheroes. DC Comics is the home of a pantheon of remarkable, iconic women," goes on to list women. "We're committed to telling diverse stories with a diverse point of view. We want these adventures to resonate in the real world, reflecting the experiences of our diverse readership. Can we improve on that? We always can, and we aim to. We'll have exciting new stories and about new projects with women creators in the coming months, and we'll be making announcements close to publication. Many of the above creators will be working on new projects as we continue to tell ongoing adventures of our characters." Bullshit. Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. That didn't happen. Of all the creators that I listed, how many of them would go on to have jobs in the New 52 within the first 2 years?
I didn't even know Fiona Staples did anything with DC.
Yeah, I
Her
heard that name.
interiors for DC were during Wildstorm, not New 52. I just looked it up because I'm like, oh, that seems like riding the saga wave just to name drop Fiona Staples.
Yeah.
She did some covers for like Thunder Agents and stuff, which, not to demean cover work, but it's not like interiors for what they're not hiring her for a book.
Crazy. It's crazy. And they said all that, and yet we just talked about the way that Gail Simone was treated. So frustrating.
Plus what we talked about last episode with the 1% comment.
Exactly. We referenced Scott Snyder earlier, and I want to turn back to Scott because he, as Kale teased earlier, nearly left the Batman project altogether in the first arc, during the Court of Owls arc. Another creator who almost left the series. Someone said, I think, that, it seems like the top end books were basically left alone. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Scott and Greg had several battles that they had to fight with editorial about the way they were approaching this series. So this is what Scott said, quote, "We just finished the first Batman storyline, Court of Owls. It was at the printer, and word came down from above that they weren't sure, that they wanted Batman not to be able to solve the mystery of the Owls, whether Lincoln March was really his brother. They wanted us to change it, to make it so that he definitely solved it. For me, that would have changed the entire story, because the point of the story was the opposite. I remember standing in Target, pushing a cart of paper towels, screaming into the phone, 'You go down that hallway and you tear up my contract.'
Yep.
Honestly, if you want to know what I think the big problem was from a structural standpoint, the biggest problem I had with it architecturally as an initiative was that it didn't have rules about the way continuity was going to work. Ultimately, we didn't have an Uber story fully fleshed out. There were sort of hints of one with Pandora and Flashpoint. There were good ideas there, but there wasn't a big narrative. We didn't really have time. We were starting over, making the characters younger, their histories malleable. Because it was also raw and unformed, so new and exciting to everyone, there wasn't really a chance to build an Uber story yet. We were making it up every day and then tearing it apart and then making it up all over again. So we were all just working on the fly. It was innovative and fun, but as exciting as unpredictability can be, it can wear on everyone. Now, Scott would go on to tell a story about how he and Greg had to fight tooth and nail with editorial about the issue of Batman that takes place in the Court of Owls lair or whatever, where Bruce is drugged and the pages turn and you're meant to read the issue, I think it's clockwise. and you turn the book around as you turn the pages. DC thought that that would never work and that that would result in a big problem with audiences not understanding what was going on. And Scott and Greg had to tell them, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Luckily, DC relented, and we got a tremendous issue that I think really helped that arc stand out. But if it was up to DC, that never would have happened. That's not like the biggest deal in the world, because sometimes you think something isn't going to work that ends up working. It is sort of an example of trusting your creators, but sometimes creators get things wrong. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, but I'm just glad that Scott and Greg won out in that situation. Oof. Man, you guys still rocking with this? We've got a little bit more to go. That was your cue to say, yeah, we love it.
Oh, hell yeah. Sorry.
Oh, I thought you were talking to the chat on that one.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
It's all right. Let's talk about one of the other egregious sins of the New 52. We've got just a little bit more to go. This one involves, I think, what is many people's favorites of the New 52 era. Certainly one of mine, Batwoman. Now, Batwoman is a tremendously popular series to this day. This specific time during Batwoman's history is reprinted and reprinted. Isn't it? I think it was announced, I want to say, as one of the compact books that's impending.
Impending, yep. I think a summer next year. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really popular. It's a hugely successful series. But unfortunately, its legs were cut out from under it, and the initial creative team of Hayden Blackman and J.H. Williams III left the series in 2013, September of 2013. They had been on it from 2011. They got 26 issues in the tank, so a little over 2 years worth of stories they were able to tell before they left the series. Now, it's important to understand that Batwoman, this story is based on Kate Kane, who is a lesbian of Jewish descent, and she had a girlfriend. Her girlfriend in the book was Maggie Sawyer. And their relationship progressed to the point where they became engaged. Now, the creators were told that they could have the engagement, that these two could get engaged, as long as they never tried to actually push through a marriage.
Should have been me.
I remember that.
And so after a battle with the company, they decided to leave. So I'm going to refer to an article by today.com. This was huge news. This news penetrated the public sphere, which is not the reason you want to be trending. And they said the following. In issue 17, Batwoman popped the question to Sawyer, the first lesbian wedding proposal in a mainstream comic. But in a tweet to ComicsAlliance.com editor this week, Williams said, "We fought to get them engaged, but we're told emphatically no marriage can result." In their blog post, Blackman and Williams wrote, quote, "In recent months, DC has hired us to alter or completely discard many long-standing storylines in ways that we feel compromise the character and the series. Among the 11th hour directives they said left them frustrated and angry, the creative team said that there were mostly crushingly prohibited from ever showing Kate and Maggie actually getting married. We are both heartbroken over leaving." In a statement of response, DC Entertainment spokesperson said, as acknowledged by the creators involved, the editorial differences with the writers of Batwoman had nothing to do with the sexual orientation of the character.
I remember when this happened. It was a big deal because it happened abruptly, from what I remember too.
Yeah.
Like mid-arc. And J.H. Williams is probably one of the most distinct artists I've ever read a comic from. So him coming off of a book is a huge deal because nobody can really mimic him. So it completely changes the feel of a title. And then add in the whole Kate Kane and Maggie Sawyer of it all. I remember this being a huge deal. Yeah.
Now, for context, in March of 2012, 1 year earlier, this same exact book won the GLAAD Media Award for Outstanding Comic Book.
Wow.
And in 2012, Marvel had North Star get married.
They like want to see what we can do.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
that was a Astonishing X-Men, I believe, and it sold like hotcakes.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Just outright to go from a GLAAD nominated book to an antithesis of that. Hey, this isn't gonna happen. Actually, it got a little too gay.
Exactly. It's insane. It's insane. This was a huge disappointment to me. I remember really, really loving this series and seeing it cancel, or not canceled, but seeing this creative team that I thought was firing on all cylinders leave the title. I was like, well, guess I'm done with this shit. I really wanted to see the marriage.
Not even just the marriage part. There was a lot of unresolved threads in that book. And I remember that was one of the big creative shifts, like creative team shifts in comics that like actually pissed me off. And I think I gave the book maybe 3 issues afterwards. I was like, I can't do it. And she hasn't had a title since the end of that run, I believe, or not those creative guys, but like that entire volume.
Yeah, seemingly not.
Well, for his part, Dan DiDio said this: heroes shouldn't have happy personal lives. That is our mandate. That is our edict, and that is our stance.
The fuck? Kale, you're on mute, bud. Awkward.
We hate happiness. DC Comics.
New
Quote
52, you're not wrong.
Put it on a sign.
Man, that's
Damn.
the Peter Parker defense, huh?
Is that the Peter Parker defense?
Well, you can never be happy. His personal life always has to have conflict, you know?
Can't be relatable if he's not married. If he's married, if he's a grown up and a teacher, how's a construction worker going to relate to Peter Parker? How's a straight person ever going to relate to Batwoman if they're gay and married?
Could never.
Now, I do want to say, I don't think that this was related to her being lesbian. I don't think this has anything to do with it being a lesbian relationship. I think that is an unfortunate it's an unfortunate fact that this was the book that had this happen because of what the significance would have been, what it would have meant if they had let the marriage go through. But I really do believe DiDio when he says that this is how he feels across the board. We lost the relationship of Superman and Lois at this time period. Notably, Superman would go on to date Wonder Woman. And we had that big book, which I loved for what it's worth. But that would be the relationship there. They would pair up Carol Ferris with, I believe it was Kyle Rayner, not Hal Jordan, for a relationship at the time. So, yeah.
New Guardians, right?
Yeah. So they were definitely mixing things up and trying to deliberately do different things with the relationships and almost just kind of like not give us what we want on purpose, which is not uncommon in comics.
It's like the old tease and edging technique.
The old
and they
one.
still do it. Unfortunately, if you can believe it, there's more. I have 2 major beats I want to get to before we close out. Now I want to deliver on the promise of... Actually, no, I'll save that for last. I will save that for last. Here's the last creator that we're going to hear from on their awful experience with the New 52 today. That's Paul Cornell. I teased last week that we would get into Paul Cornell. This dude had disdain for DC. This is only a couple of years into the New 52 that he said these things. Paul Cornell wrote Demon Knights. Paul Cornell is the writer who approached the woman at the end of the panel that we discussed last week, where she was shouted down and yelled at. Paul Cornell is the one that approached her. Go ahead, Gale.
I have women. You can come find women in my book. I have those. I like them.
It's crazy. This is what Paul Cornell had to say in an interview with Bleeding Cool. This is edited, by the way. I have seen a few creators attempt to openly display their frustrations recently with DC, and I feel for them. Certain creators have tried to enlighten fans and media about the Machiavellian bullshit they are encountering, and I think those freelancers are a little freaked out that this is the new status quo, so I want to address this here. Why am I willing to describe certain specific events during my brief encounter with them for the New 52? Because I am appalled at the way in which creators are being bullied and somewhat freaked out at the things I saw in my own time there. I encountered more lies and veiled threats, more attempts to justify dysfunctional behavior and systems than I have ever encountered in my career. I am rather inclined to believe that the recent creator whistleblowers are not being self-serving. They are incredibly frustrated. There are not always two sides to every story. Not if one side fires a gun and the other gets hit with a bullet. I have always tried to be a person that interacted well with fans and tried to understand the needs of the publisher. To illustrate, this is a fucking crazy story I'm about to tell. I couldn't believe this. To illustrate, early on when I was working on the Dark Knight book, I received a confused phone call from an editor. Turns out David Finch was in San Diego and could not be reached. But his issue number 5, which was the last of his solo series before we rebooted the title, had not been dialogued and was in danger of being returnable. Now, and let me explain that. That means that Final Order Cutoff had already come and gone, but that the book had not yet been completed. If Final Order Cutoff comes and the book has already sold, which means that stores have already bought it, but then there is no book, then the retailers can just send the book, can just get their money back because nothing was produced to them. So DC didn't want that to happen.
Sure.
Back to Paul. Now, I had no exposure to this book, no knowledge of it, and no information such as a script to work with. But they were literally hitting me up to dialogue David's book for him in one evening because he was at a convention. They barely knew me yet, and they were asking me for a huge favor. At that time, my wife and I had just welcomed our second child into our home, and I was exhausted and unable to visit San Diego Comic-Con. But even though I barely knew the editor, and even though I had only artwork to go on of the 4 completed books so far, I re-dialogued the book as a professional courtesy. I also made it clear that I should not be given a writing credit out of courtesy and respect to David. To me, that was a professional person acting in a professional manner. How do you take a creator who is willing to go that far for you and piss him off to the point where he asks you to lose his phone number? It's just idiotic.
Yeah.
Wait, sorry. So, whose phone number got lost?
So Paul is saying that he told DC to lose his number.
Right.
Because of this letter dialogue thing.
No, so that was a story of him trying to illustrate how willing he was to play ball.
Yes,
and that he did this no matter how shitty it was. He left for reasons I'm going to describe going forward.
Okay.
When I started putting together books for the New 52, I was completely left alone on the Dead Man series, and I enjoyed a great collaborative relationship with my editor. Perhaps Dead Man was under the radar, so to speak, but we did what we were asked, and it was a neat little book that provided the publisher with what they had requested. Contrast that to the manipulative behavior demonstrated by the people behind the Dark Knight book, and it leaves one rather puzzled. Why would one series be untouched and another micromanaged with absolutely no creative direction whatsoever? I think there are some obvious answers, but I would prefer people draw their own conclusions. Suffice it to say that there are fans not getting the creators in these books. They are getting an unpalatable product, which is destroyed by editorial interference perpetrated by unqualified project managers. Now, this is me talking. Project manager is a very interesting word to use when describing an editor, because editors in Big Two comics are largely a lot more like project managers than they are traditional editors.
I think Heather Antos even described some of that when we had her on the show last year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
Yep.
It's a lot of wrangling cats.
That was the example I think she said, right?
Yeah.
And that's the what feels the most at fault here is the wrangling, the people involved who the creatives need direction. That much should be provided and offered, and support on top of that. But the knowledge gap there between editor and writer needed to be closed, because otherwise, yeah, you're gonna output things that from one day to the next don't make sense, or feel like this isn't meshing well with whatever is currently going on in the universe.
I think for me, almost just as bad seems to be the inconsistency on these things. Like, you could have complete creative control over one book and then the next book not. Like, as a writer, that unbalanced nature would almost drive me just as insane. Like, if you're working for a company where you know you're going to have that creative micromanaging, you can expect it. Sometimes you can adjust to that. But not having it on one book and then having it completely on another would be that's just too much. And that just shows that there's no cohesion in the shop.
Well, there are some people who might see this a little differently. And so Rich asks, some will see this as sour grapes, that you failed at Marvel with your last series there and only partially published, and you've had little traction at DC. What evidence can you present that this is not the case? Perhaps if I sent you the actual script that I wrote for Dark Knight 5 to compare against the pile of turd that they published. I don't know. Perhaps if I told you that I refused to rewrite number 6 when it was handed in because I had already written the script a few times and then reworked it to fulfill editorial requirements prior to the penciling, only to have a completely different story handed to me. If you read the credits, you will see that someone is given credit for dialogue assists. That's actually quite unfair on that creator. I told DC to take my name off that book. It pained me that they did not do so, nor on number 7. Issue 8 of that series was begun as a 5-part story. It was then pared down to 2 issues by me when it became clear the relationship was not working. It was actually published as 1 issue. That's what the fans paid for. My name and a reworking of the issue done without my knowledge, where I was alerted to the fact only when the issue hit the stands. What a repulsive mess. Shame on the editors and shame on the publisher. Think about that. Think about what I just said. Paul Cornell did DC a favor and wrote issue 5 of Dark Knight from scratch without Finch's notes, not knowing what the story was going into it, and not knowing what Finch was trying to accomplish. He did it anyway in one night with a new child in his house. And when the book came out and he saw it, it was completely different than what he did for them in one night. I'll say it again. They rewrote what he wrote without his knowledge. And he didn't know until he read the finished project.
That's gross, man.
That's vile.
Was he the editor-in-chief at DC?
Sorry?
Because he picked up the book and he saw something different.
Right. Paul ends with this. DC is in the toilet right now. It reminds me of the way Marvel was just before they did Marvel Knights. I'll let you draw your own conclusions about the similarities and connections. Suffice it to say, they have created a culture of dishonesty that affects too many creators. And the worst part of it all is that they bully their creators. They tried to bully me, and I told them to go to hell. The horror stories are many and varied. I have a few of my own, and I have heard way too many of them from various creators who are being beaten into submission with the threat of losing their jobs if they do not play ball. DC seems to have developed a culture where they think professionalism is screwing a creator in some fashion and then pretending to be friendly at a convention. Professionalism is about handing in quality work on time, or being about or about being friendly to fans at conventions, or about working towards a mutually beneficial goal. Professionalism is about dedication to your craft, not about running around offices like a demented gerbil telling everyone how busy you are. So busy, in fact, that you forget to do any actual work. Here's what pisses me off about this situation. It doesn't take a rocket science to see that there are a lot of very unhappy creators at DC lately. Well, can you imagine how many more are unhappy that we don't know about because they feel as if they speak out, they will be blacklisted? Can you imagine the miserable conditions some of these creators are subjected to? Not all creators, I'm sure. Some are perfectly happy, just not me. The point is that DC has begun to act like a bully, to subject people to shitty working conditions as if it is doing them a favor. If I have seen good comics come from the creator-publisher collaboration, why the hell would I allow myself to be subjected to that nonsense at this stage of my career?
Damn. Yeah, man, he's laying it out. He's taking them to task, and I think that that's important to do for a writer, for a creative in this situation. Like, those things are important. It's a shame that he was treated that way, and I'm glad that he's come out to be so vocal about these things, because you don't know about them until somebody says something.
And then he went right back to Marvel right after that too. So he's like, "Screw you guys, going with the other team."
Yeah.
I think the thing that really gets me is like he asked them to take his name off too, and they left it on.
It's he's not listed on his Wikipedia as, like, Dark Knight is not a book on his Wikipedia.
Yeah, I can't imagine why. Like to me, like in an industry where if it's not a character, it's a name that makes, that sells a title, right? And having your name on a book that you didn't write, and it comes out bad, like that is awful, and that's gotta feel just terrible.
Someone's gonna pick that up and be like, "Wow, this Paul Cornell guy can't write."
Yeah.
I couldn't believe this. I was riveted and enraptured and horrified to read this story. And I think Paul is completely right. You could look at it as sour grapes if you want to, but
Oh, bless you.
thank you. Consider how many of these stories.
Goodness, bless you.
Sorry. Wow.
Whoa,
Whoa,
anything
hey,
for
easy.
attention.
Whoa. 3 for 3. Consider how many of these stories I've already told you. And I'm not telling you them all.
Yeah.
This is par for the course. Think about what happened to John Rozum.
Yeah. The dude didn't even, like, his name is on the book, and he didn't even know what was happening. They were plotting it behind his back.
Man,
Wild.
It's a disgrace.
Yeah, Sean's allergic to all this editorial bullshit too. Which
I'm allergic
For
to
real?
bullshit. That is
Yeah.
true. That is very true. All right. One last story. This is what we teased. The big battle between Scott Snyder, the Golden Boy. Scott is, by all accounts, a wonderful person. I've met him a lot of times now. Always had great interactions. Exchanged an email with him. He's a wonderful guy. For him to be in this position of arguing with someone on Twitter in a public way, has to tell you a lot about his level of frustration. And he's not the only one who was caught up in a beef, because not only was Scott involved, but Greg Capullo was involved, and so was Tom Brevoort. So what caused these three individuals who don't even work at the same company to jump into a fray like that, a fracas like that, publicly? Well, who else? Rob Liefeld.
Hey, the man. Let's go.
Oh, Levi's model himself.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Now, Rob, for his part, had 3 titles.
Count him.
I don't know.
Rob had 3 titles that he was appointed during the New 52 era. He had Hawk and Dove. I need you guys to help me because I actually don't have in front of me which titles Rob was.
It was
specifically
Hawk and
on.
Dove, Savage Hawkman, I think he wrote,
Yes.
and then he
Yes,
worked on
Hawkman.
Deathstroke.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I
There
thought
you
it
go.
was Deathstroke. Yeah.
By 2012, he made his announcement that he was leaving. He said the reasons for leaving were massive indecision, last minute, and I mean last minute changes that alter everything, editor pissing contests, no thanks. Okay. I mean, I can get with that. Like, I think he was perfectly valid for wanting to leave, and nothing that he said is out of character with anything else that we have heard from any other creator around this time.
Yeah.
That's not the problem. The problem is that he got into a massive argument with Scott Snyder that started in DMs and then spilled out into the public eye. So, here we go. He made a disparaging remark about the Batman title, and essentially implied that Batman was selling because it's Batman. It has nothing to do with anything else, right? So Scott Snyder DMs him. All these DMs are public, by the way, because Rob himself put them out. He took a screenshot and posted it on Twitter. Scott said, "I'll ask you privately, Rob. You've always been supportive of me, and I have been the same. But was that Batman comment aimed at me? I'll wait back to hear from you here." Scott said, Rob said, "Really, Scott? Are you the only guy working on Batman? That's my answer." Scott, as the head Batman writer and someone who just defended Smitty a bit, and I would assume you're talking about me, not so? Scott says, "I ask because everyone is asking me to respond to you, but I am giving this the benefit of the doubt and hoping you are not talking about me. I can assure you Batman doesn't sell the way it does because it's Batman. It sells that way because of me and Greg." Rob, when I show some stats, I'll be clear who I'm speaking of, not you. I could give 2 shits about what you say, pro or con, about anyone. Sorry. Scott said, "Greg will reiterate that more strongly than me to you, I can assure you, if you are talking about us." So in a weird way, he kind of like threatened Rob with Greg.
Yeah.
Have you
See,
seen- have you
I'll
seen
let him
Greg,
off
though?
the leash, dude. He's there. He's revving.
That dude looks like he can bark.
He looks
Yeah,
like he could bite.
Word.
Rob, wasn't aware you were head Batman writer. Ooh, nice title if you're into that, lol. Scott, anyone on Batman is called head Batman writer. It's called the lead book by editorial. Rob, you are fucking crazy. We aren't doing this in private anymore. Scott, it's not specific to me, but I'm not sure why you're so angry at me. Like I said, I've always been in your corner at DC, smiley face. Dude, why are you mad at me? I'm genuinely confused. From there, Rob took this to the public eye and exposed their conversation and forced Scott to react.
It's
So,
wild. What a debut episode of Rob Explanations, huh?
This is what Rob said in public. "Get over yourself, you pretentious prick.
And he added him, right?
Yeah, he added him.
What
Been
an
berated
asshole.
in DMs by Scott Snyder this morning. Excuse me if I don't marvel at your amazing abilities to write Batman. Piss off. I'd like to think that if you're going to wave your ego around on Batman, you'd remember all that came before you. Holy crap. Average Batman book sells 80K. Enough said. Even though Batman was selling
One
at
something,
least
right?
40,000 more than that, but all right. Scott said, nice. Your Twitter feed's the best thing you've written all year.
That's
Damn.
a good one.
Yo.
It's usually par for the course. We can't see his Twitter feed on the main Comics Pals account because we're still blocked. I don't know why, but
That's one of the greatest clapbacks that he could have had, Scott. That was awesome.
I like to think that this was maybe originally a subtweet of David Finch's Dark Knight that morphed into him just getting pissed off with Scott for like trying to talk to him.
Yeah, I don't know. Rob says, of course, because it's not edited. Scott said, I'll give you credit, Rob. Batman might sell in spite of me and Greg Capullo, as you say, but Deathstroke and Hawkman failed because of you. Credit where it's due, brother. And that's all I'll say on that. Comics.
Wow.
Rob, my sales went up on those books. Sorry, bud. Scott, lol. And you can put that in your pouch and keep it for later. Smiley face. Scott is just getting in his ass. This is crazy.
This makes me want Scott Snyder to write more funny books.
He's got a sense of humor. Rob, one word, haunt. 2 words, Swamp Thing. Not all creations equal. Batman is the #1 selling character in the history of the biz. Period. End of story. Will endure beyond comic creators. Wow.
Yo, what got up fucking Liefeld's ass, dude?
I think his Levi's are on too tight.
I think that's just how Rob rolls. Honestly. Like, I think he's just kind of a douche. I don't know him personally. We got an interview with him one time many years ago, and
Nice guy,
yeah,
seemingly.
he was perfectly chill.
Yeah, great interview. He he asked us to be cool, and we said, "Hey, no problem." We were. It was cool,
And then we got blocked.
and we're blocked.
To this day, I have no clue at all why we were blocked, but sure.
I bet it was one of those. Remember when like block lists were a thing where like it would block people who
Yeah.
followed certain people? I bet you it was something like that.
Scott decided that he would rein all this in, and he said, back to our regularly scheduled programming, I'll echo what my brother Greg Capullo said before. All of us on Team Batman are extremely proud of this success, and that success is due to your support. But as the team on the book, if we didn't believe that your incredible and humbling support was due at least a little to us doing a somewhat decent job, if we sat back and said, Batman sells Batman, what sort of book would that engender? We have to think the sales are because of you guys. Like what we're doing, because you guys like what we're doing on the book. It fuels us to continue to do stories that matter to us, knowing that you're telling us you like what we're giving you on a character that means everything to us both. That's it. I will not fight or post another negative tweet about Rob or anyone. And I want to say I'm sorry to you all and no one else. To you, the fans of comics, not just me or Rob, for bothering with this. It's a waste. And we should be pushing the good, not attacking each other. And I'm guilty of that too. So I'm sorry to you for going negative. Thanks to those of you who reminded me of that. I think Scott did the right thing. That is exactly what the fuck I would do. And if you look at our comment section on YouTube, you know it's a fact.
Yeah. Full disclosure, Sean is the one responding to you in the comments, if that's not clear to anyone.
In the trenches.
The people that actually listen to the show aren't the people that I get into arguments with on our socials.
Yep.
But I said Tom Brevoort gets involved.
I bet it's the historical aspect.
Now, Rob was without a job. Rob had no job. So fans were tweeting at Tom to say, hey, when are you going to hire Rob Liefeld to work for Marvel again? And Tom said, after that Twitter flame out, I can't say I'd be in a hurry to get on that train.
Word.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people came out in defense of the editor that Rob was blasting. Gail Simone, that's what Scott was referencing, and Tom did as well. So Rob saw this, and then he jumped in the mix. Someone told me that loser fat ass Brevoort was talking trash about me today. I dropped him a while back. I got to coach football games. Out. Sorry they passed you over for EIC, Tommy B. Get over it and get back to mixing and matching Avengers and X-Men. Hashtag doucher. I know, Tommy B. Why don't you all tell Kirkman how concerned you are for his future post Marvel? That's our funniest bit that we howl at. Of course, a reference to the idea that Robert Kirkman was going to struggle after his short stint at Marvel, then Robert going on to become arguably the most successful creator-owned writer of all time. And I guess Rob is saying that that's a joke in the Image offices. Is that true or not? I don't know. Tom said, you remain a sweetheart, Rob. Don't go changing. Also, feel free to say any of this to my face, you feckless bully. Takes a big man to go postal publicly on a young editor like that. Hashtag kicks puppies too. Liefeld replied, happy to, at Tom Brevoort. Then you can bump me with your gut. And FYI, I don't drink. Haven't touched liquor in 30 years. It's a wonder this guy gets work. He's worked at Marvel since.
Yeah. He's only just supposedly retired.
Right. Another bout of anger on his part.
It really feels like a Scott Steiner of comics.
This dude is out of his mind. But that was the big blowout.
Wild.
Damn. No.
Anybody
thanks.
remember that happening?
I don't remember the Brevoort of it all. I remember the Scott Snyder and Liefeld part. Yeah.
It's insane, man. Insane. But there are so many more New 52 stories to tell. I actually have a boatload more notes in my document for this episode that we're not going to get to because this has been way too long. But I promised a month's worth of stories, so we have a lot more to talk about. Next week, we're going to hear more from editors who worked on the New 52, who have a different story to tell about the way things were behind the scenes. We're also going to hear more from Dan DiDio. We're going to go more over the sales figures and dive more into the waning days of the New 52, the 2013 to 2015 era, where you could really just see that the wheels were coming off the wagon, so to speak. And it's starting to become time for another change. All that and more in part 3 of our New 52 deep dive. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this part. If you did, please make sure that you hit that like button, smash it up. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe to the channel because we've got a lot more to come. This show's not even over. Somehow, some way. We are not done. We have more to do. But we will resume that piece of it next week. Whew. I need a break, so I need you guys to talk.
What?
That's a lot.
A hard
It's
request. Wild that wild that for all of, especially like now that we're reflecting on this, that this is all of the turmoil going on in the background, and my first comics experience of all of this, I was happy as a pup, man.
Pig and shit.
Apparently,
Yeah.
because damn, dude.
It's so funny too because like I was looking over the titles as I was again putting together my list, and I was like, bro, all the ones I don't like are, or all the ones I do like are the good ones. Like none of them are, there are any Liefelds there. I like, you will see a strong theme through my my top 5.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Let's see. I haven't even been able to look at the comments really.
Yeah,
They've
chat's
been
been
popping
flying
off,
off.
man.
The
Yeah.
comments lately have been like, "Oh wow, what the fuck?"
Yeah. How did DC let him get away with this? Because DC was the problem. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we've had Gavin come in. He was here last week and he talked about how different it is to work at DC now. Granted, Gavin wasn't there at the time, but certainly you hear these kinds of stories and he works around people who probably were there. And, it's
He
like,
was-
whoa, that I didn't experience anything like this.
he was just saying he lost in his fantasy football league last week to Ron Marz.
Ah, that's funny. Silhouette says you guys should also do videos on the different Marvel eras. Yeah, I haven't done a Marvel deep dive yet. I would like to. I need suggestions though.
We could do about the original bullpen, and we'll all just do a little coke at the same time.
Ooh.
I can. I've got a deviated septum. That would probably.
So do I,
mess me up.
Sean. We can figure it out.
DV says, "Go ahead, Marco."
I just had this comment from earlier from Karsten K. How do you tank a Batman title? Well, you let Rob Liefeld pencil it.
Well,
Did
I
he
was-
do one fairly recently? No, I'm thinking of Silvestri. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
of.
I'm trying to think if Liefeld ever did a Batman variant at any point while Snyder was on it, and I can't recall.
I actually think a Rob Liefeld variant on Batman would sell like hotcakes.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
massively popular, so I don't think that would tank a Batman book. Maybe if he was on interiors, but
Like it's wild to think that as many people want him out of comics and like as many people like deride him, there are so many people that would drop a hundo on anything he puts out.
Yeah. I had another one here from DV earlier in the chat. Seemed like the 2010s was an effort from both companies to take power away from the star writer driven model of the 2000s. I think it felt like a lot of creative control, very much, and it was mentioned in some of the conversation of like bottlenecking, trying to filter all of it through one individual, because sure, you had maybe this individual had a vision for things, but the ability to relinquish and distribute that work and then disseminate ideas is really important at that level of management. And so if you're not doing those things, you're creating more problems than you are solutions, just because you want to make sure that things are filtered for you.
So Rob Liefeld did do a variant to Justice League written by Scott Snyder. So down the line, he was doing the covers for a Snyder book. It's funny. It's not a very good cover either.
responding to what Marco said, it's hard because I kind of feel like it's appropriate for editorial, especially when you're launching a new universe, to say, hey, this is what we need.
Yep.
I think that is appropriate. And I think they needed to be hands-on. I think that what I've given are examples of egregiousness in that and a lack of cohesion behind the scenes about what DC actually wanted creators to produce. So to me, that's the real problem.
No vision, no broad vision. I think that makes a lot of sense. We were talking about AVX, happening around this time, and that was a lot of titles going through, and granted it was an event, but it was several titles, responding to one event that became sort of a universe in itself, right? And then you had what was Brevoort on that? Is that a Brevoort event? Anybody know?
Still, yes.
Surely. Yeah. But all of that was also filtered through Bendis, who was doing the main event. Right? So I think you have the event, you have the world of the event and the whole of Marvel at the same time. I feel like a big part of the problem was that they were starting from scratch, supposedly. They didn't know what they wanted to do, and they didn't have decades of history to fall back on because they started from scratch. There's no precedent for anything that they're doing because they've erased it all.
That's a huge problem. And I think the proof is in the pudding as to why, there were all these issues. I've taken down your suggestions for a Marvel deep dive. I'd love to see more come in because as I've researched, I already know what the next deep dive is going to be, but as I've researched to try to look for interesting topics to do with Marvel, I've come up short a lot of times. So I definitely want your ideas.
I think the Heroes Reborn era or the New Universe era are also decent times for Marvel. Interesting.
Yeah, I took
times,
those chat suggestions down of those two.
DV says, honestly, this matches how Bob Harris ran the X titles. Writers were stenographers for his ideas. Wow.
I think that's what Paul Cornell was hinting at.
Mm.
He didn't want to evoke the name of Bob Harris for whatever reason, but he said, I'll leave it to the people to figure out. And he specifically referenced the time before Marvel Knights. I think he's talking about Harris. That him being in charge was a big problem. I don't know.
Wow. The Comics Journal has a great deep dive into the Bill Jemas era of Marvel that just came out. That dude was whack. Thanks, DV.
I'll take note of that. Thank you. Jim Shooter deep dive, all new, all different Marvel. Jeez, you guys are. Thank you. Thank you.
New, all different. That's right. Remember that.
It was like 2 years ago. That's why, Marco.
All right.
Robert Cashaback just dropping by to say hi. Gotta run. What is up?
Salute to you, sir.
Good to see you.
Hot dog.
He's got to run it back, cash back.
That's right.
Okay. A lot of effort was put in to curate and put together the deep dive presentation that you guys have just witnessed. If you enjoy it, if you enjoy what we come here and do every single week, and if you want to show us your support, patreon.com/thecomicspals is the absolute best way to do that. We are eternally grateful and thankful to everybody who takes that extra step. And frankly, we are overwhelmed by all the support that we've been getting from you guys here over the last few weeks. So many of you choosing to join the Palsverse, so many of you choosing to join our Patreon, even at levels below that, just to be a part of what we're doing. And I thank you so much. One of the perks of which there are many, you can see them on our Patreon page, is that you get a monthly hangout with us. And we're just regular people. So it's not like we're not celebrities, right? But being able to hang out with you guys, that's really the privilege. Like, you guys are supporting us, and what we get out of it is we get to hang out with you and talk comics and go over your favorites, what we're all reading and enjoying. Some of the conversations that start on the Discord server, they expand during these Patreon hangouts. It's really one of the most fun things that I get to do in the month, and I'm not even sure how many of you know that we do that. So that's always the last Sunday of the month. I would love to see a whole bunch of you show up for the next one. If you have access, please show up. And if you don't, consider it, because among the other perks, that's, to me, one of the coolest ones.
But how much does it cost, Sean?
That one I think is just $7. I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't remember. I'm looking it up now.
$7.99.
Yeah. I don't want to get into the price. Patreon.com/thecomicspals. Check it out for yourselves and make your decisions. What I do want to get into is saying thank you. I would love to thank our patrons who are incredibly supportive of what we do here. And I want to start with the Palsverse legends. These are the people who go above and beyond the Call of Duty. These are the people who support us as much as they possibly can. Special shout out to Thunderstruck Rebecca Alejandro, the Hound of Justice Atomic Hound, Starcross Catherine Stars, Red Spiral the Spiral Storm, Orseus the Waterbound, and joining this tier of the Palsverse, Adam and Bernie the Best Boy Smith. Adam just upped his tier earlier today, so huge shout out to you, Adam, for that. And I also want to thank. I'm sorry. Hold on a second. Okay, yeah, here we go. I also want to thank the Night Stalker Harris Dajinski, who is in the chat, Brian Demolished Del Pozo, Kefis the Incorruptible, who's in the chat, Momentum Mike Elliott, Dan the Truth Trudeau, Jalen the Sanguine Sorcerer, Marley Manistorm, Slow Flow Dameron, Christian Uncaged Harriet, Always Laughing, the Spear of Justice, Izzy Spears, who's in the chat, the Great Destroyer Hyper Viper 89, Robert Runback Cashaback, who just ran over here to say hello, Pete the Dreamweaver Collins, Matthew Malice Price, James Just Jamming Jones, Amin Almighty Perez, who is in the chat, Paul Powerhouse Smith, Andrew the Galaxian Smith, Neon Knight the Cosmic Avenger, Matthew the Shade Cosmo, BJ Kicks, the Living Blade Boss Rondier, whose name I saw earlier, the Grand Alchemist, Chop Harder Alchemist, John Barrier B, and Simon Gale Force, whose origin I am prepared to present to you now.
Gale Force. Okay.
Here we go. Simon has a secret, an awful truth that keeps him up at night. He lives in fear of people learning the truth about him and what the consequences could be. He has a job he likes well enough. He would lose it if they knew. He has people in his life he likes well enough. They would be horrified by him if they knew the truth. Simon spent his whole life chasing acceptance. He wanted to fit in and find his tribe, the place he belonged. How does one do that? By wearing the right clothes, getting the right job, saying the right things to the right people at the right time. And Simon had done it all. Simon made people like him. Well enough. He couldn't bear the thought of losing it all. It made him feel like tearing at his own skin. That's why Simon found himself on the edge of the roof of his building, contemplating jumping off. Jumping and ending it himself would at least give him some control over his destiny. It would mean that he would take his secret with him to the grave, never having to face the looks of horror and disgust he knew he would get if people learned what he was hiding, what he has to hide. What would Barry and Chris from work say if they saw him as he really is? God, he could remember how they reacted when he let slip how much he enjoys watching The Bachelor. Oh, how they laughed and mocked him. I mean, it was just playful ribbing, right? Their words hurt and stung a bit, but it's all in good fun. No harm, no foul. This was different, though. There is no way they would invite him out to the bar after this. And what about Katie? Simon's been crushing on her for months, trying to work up the gumption to ask her out. He knew she liked him well enough. They had a good rapport at work, and she would often bring him a donut by his cubicle. It wasn't his favorite kind, but at least she was thinking of him. Sure. It was the box that she brought for the office, but she brought his straight over to him. No, none of them would accept him as he truly is. But Simon didn't know when it would happen again. It could happen in front of Katie. And then what? He has to jump. It's the only way he can protect himself. At least he would die with his dignity intact. He peers over the edge of the roof, suddenly taking in just how high up he is. He wouldn't be intact at all from this high of a jump. His remains would be a bloody Rorschach test for everyone to see. What would they see in him then? Just then, Simon clutches at his stomach, eyes bulging out of his face, doubled over in pain. It's coming now, whether he wants it to or not. Time to make a choice. He felt his body betraying him, wanting so desperately to stay normal, to be just like everyone else, to fit in. His body wouldn't let him, and he hated himself for it. He let out a blood-curdling scream as he begins to feel the skin that covers his shoulder blades burst open. Blood poured from his back as they ripped their way out of his body, leaving Simon helpless to stop the transformation. He had to choose. Simon summons all the strength he can muster and pulls himself up on the lip of the building, still crying out in agony. People on the streets below were looking up now. Screams in the night were commonplace in the city these days, but Simon's were distressing enough to get attention. Knowing that people had heard him set Simon over the edge, literally, and he hurled himself off the building, a dozen stories above ground, the only outcome of this being his death. The people stood watching as a man fell from the sky. A man with, what are those? Wings? The scene made one of them think of an angel falling from heaven. Simon felt the rush of air in his lungs, the burning of his transformation in his back, and the fear of death rushing through him. At that moment, he made another choice. He would not let himself die. He wouldn't settle for a half-life either, a life of accepting people liking him well enough. His choice is to soar. So he did. Instinct did the rest, and his body course-corrected, his wings outstretching and taking him out of freefall. He hovers there for a moment, still high above the people below, who all see him for what he is. His wings were stained blood red from the transformation, but they were still beautiful. Simon flew higher up, taking into the skies far above the roof of the building he'd fallen from. He only ever saw the horror in this, but tonight, with the moon shining the way it was, realizing how close he'd come to death, Simon took a deep breath. A breath of acceptance. He pushed his body, his wings, as hard as he could, and he flew through the skies at incredible speed, thinking about the people in his life who actually didn't like him very much at all, who didn't know him very much at all. And come to think of it, he didn't like them very much either. He picked up even more speed as tears flooded his eyes and a smile emerged across his face. And even though, at this height, only the birds could hear him, he yelled at the top of his lungs, "Fuck Barry and Chris!" Simon wouldn't limit himself for others anymore. Simon would soar. Simon, thank you for soaring into our lives. Thank you for joining the Palsverse. I appreciate you and welcome.
Welcome indeed. Cool wings, dude.
I don't want to put a specific image on it. What type of wing? Did you have a type of wing?
Like texture?
On yeah, like, you know, was it, are you picturing like angel's wings? Are you picturing like big bat wings? What was your
It felt Cronenbergian in the way you described it. I was picturing flesh wings.
Ooh,
in my mind I thought of the way, like, if you could imagine Man Bat,
yeah,
but also like, not because Man Bat's wings are his arms, but like
right,
being in the back, having that same kind of like
leathery.
Yeah, but then looking like Angel, like having that weird kind of horrific, oh my god, those are, you know, wings coming out of your body, you look like a monster, but being pretty the way that Angel's wings are depicted.
I was picturing the first boss from House of the Dead 2.
Gale, it's like Robin from One Piece. Her wings.
Wait, she's got wings? Nico Robin's got wings?
Damn.
never got that far.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, white wings. Yeah, tell you. Yeah. Amin says, amazing story, Sean. Thank you so much. Can he hide his wings somehow? In my mind, the transformation happens out of his control, mostly because he has not wanted it. He's rejected it.
Yeah.
So he has no control over it. Now that he does, we'll see what happens.
And Sean, you wrote this, right?
Yes.
Are you okay? You good? You doing okay?
I don't know.
My man's just trying to sword.
Exactly, Gale. Exactly.
Izzy says, I can't wait to finish working on this Warhammer army so I can get back to painting the pals. Hey, maybe you should get to painting the pals and get back to your Warhammer army.
I want to see some Skaven if you're doing any Skaven there.
For anyone who's confused about what just happened, our patrons who are gracious enough to support us, the ones who choose to join the Palsverse, get an origin, a nickname, and a power set, based on my imagination or one of the other pals if they decide to do one. And yeah, it's the least we can do for y'all.
Can I throw out there too, and shoot me down, guys, if you want. But if somebody signs up and you want a particular pal to ride it, fuck it, call it out.
Ooh.
Oh.
Call your shot.
Yeah.
Sure.
Am I the only one that hasn't done one?
Yes.
Oh shit.
Tyler, you did one?
I did Sanguine Sorcerer.
Oh.
Yeah.
Marley Manastorm.
And Marley, yeah.
Okay, so if there's any breath left in my body, that means it's time to move the show forward and talk about the new
The
52
news.
top
Boy,
5.
we're struggling.
The new 52 top 5. So as we do around here, we love these top 5s. We're going to have to run through these fairly quickly. Let's just do our 5. Let's just do our number 5 to save a little bit of time. So we'll do our number 5 this week, and then we'll figure it out the rest of the weeks. So these are the books from the New 52 we love the most. There is no qualification other than it's a book that released during the New 52 and was a part of that overarching thing. Other than that, I don't care if you say the Flash run, the whole of it, a specific arc. It doesn't matter. It's up to you. Gale, kick us off, please.
Sure. So my number 5 is Superman Unchained. From Scott Snyder and Jim Lee. Now, I see that face, and for me, as I've stated several times, the New 52 was a mess, and I did not like a lot of it. And looking through like the publication lists, I don't remember most of the content that came from most of these books. So even if I read it, maybe I enjoyed it. I don't remember, which is almost worse to me. But what I do remember is being viscerally affected by Man of Steel. Spoilers: Superman kills Zod, and that moment for me was devastating. Because as a longtime DC fan who believed in the pinnacle like image of Superman, can't kill, above everything, Man of Steel blindsided me. And I lost faith in Superman for a while, and I just needed something to ground me in that again, because I didn't feel like DC had it. And Action Comics and the Superman title didn't do it for me. I wasn't interested in T-shirt Superman because that felt dumb, and I hated the armor look, and I wasn't at the time. I wouldn't have been interested in a George Perez book anyway. Fool. So I took the shot on Superman Unchained because I was enjoying Snyder's Batman and his Dick Grayson Batman stuff previous to the New 52. And you know what? The moment I realized that it was going to be okay and that Snyder had at least a little bit of a vision that I could get behind with Superman was he uses his ice breath on a river or something to like, I don't know, he catches somebody. I don't remember. But the point was he doesn't let them die. And that like it calmed me. I was just like, okay, I will get through this, whatever this is. It'll be okay. And I from there I didn't go full into Superman, but I relaxed. And that's what I remember with this title. Admittedly, Tyson, not a full run. It was a mini series, but as I said, that's what I recall from the New 52. That's my number 5.
Marco?
My number 5 is Justice League Dark, and particularly the Forever Evil stuff. I was getting double dose of Swamp Thing, and to see him in a team book, I picked him up whenever it was like issue 20 that he first made an appearance, and I stuck around for it. I was discovering a lot of comics. I was familiar with the Vertigo world, and so this was a place that I could ground myself pretty well. And I stuck through Justice League Dark, I think, for the entirety of the run, and but it was also my first ever event book with crossovers and all that kind of stuff. So the fact that Swamp Thing was involved, he was on a team of other Magic people that I knew. I felt like I was slowly integrating into the larger DC world, and so for that, Justice League Dark is my number 5.
Tyler?
So for me, my number 5 is I'm a big fan of Snyder's Batman run, but I wanted to pick a specific story from that run. And as I was going through the list, I was thinking, man, Court of Owls is really good. Endgame, fantastic. But the one I picked is actually Batman Super Heavy, which is the one without Bruce Wayne. It's the Mr. Bloom, James Gordon as the Batsuit Batman story, because it took a swing.
Yeah.
And I was along for the ride on that one. Because at this point you knew Snyder was doing an epic. You knew him and Capullo were doing something big. And I was just going to follow them wherever it took me. Even if it took me to James Gordon without a mustache, shaving his head and getting into a mech suit to become the new Batman. Like, saying those words still sounds crazy to me. But it was a good ass time, and that arc is a lot of fun. Tyson LaFrance says bunny suit. I love the bunny suit. I'm a big fan. And yeah, that's my pick. Snyder's run in general is big, but I want to at least have some recognition for a particular story in my top 5, and that's the one I picked.
So for my number 5, I'm gonna cheat slightly, and I'm gonna say Rot World.
Okay.
Because it is an event, but it takes 2 books that I wouldn't have an individual spot for, and it puts them together, sort of where I think they were at their best, those being Animal Man and Swamp Thing. Now, I had no familiarity with either character at the time. I knew, obviously, Scott Snyder, but I certainly didn't know, who am I thinking
Jeff
of?
Lemire.
Jeff Lemire, thank you. And Travel Foreman, who were doing incredible stuff in the Animal Man series. And so when those books seemed to be sort of on the same track, I was blown away by not only the individual quality of both books, but by the synergy that they had with each other that was otherwise not represented very well during the New 52. And it was a corner of DC that I had never touched because I was a baby. So Rot World was, to me, an incredible event. It felt organic, and in the intervening time since I've been looking into the New 52, I actually learned that not only was it organic, it wasn't something that editorial had any interest in initially. It came from the relationship between Lemire and Snyder that they were able to put this event together and make it so that the books were like talking to each other and referencing each other essentially from the word go. And what that resulted in was one of the better duo books in the New 52, one of the better events in the New 52, and something that really has resonated with me since I read it all the way back then. Those aren't characters that I've gone after since, but certainly they are that story. Those stories they were telling are stories that I won't forget.
I
That
think
sorry, was that Snyder or Sewell?
So
Oh,
Snyder. No, that
it
was
still
Snyder.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
Was it?
didn't
Oh,
pick
okay.
up until after that wrapped up.
I think
Okay,
Snyder
okay.
ended his Swamp Thing run with Raw World, if I remember
Right.
correctly.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Also, Charles Soule's Swamp Thing, very good.
Also very good.
I liked how cool it made Anton Arcane as a villain. You know, that was really upping a villain's cachet for me. And I was like, oh, this guy is awesome. It's like when the Villains Week happened, the Villains Month, seeing the Arcane special, I was like, oh, yeah, there we
That
go.
was good. Damn.
I gotta read that.
It's very good. Yeah. And Shade alongside was it Frankenstein rather, Agent of Shade. Sean, if you ever do revisit Rot World, I would include Frankenstein in that. It's an underrated part of the world. It doesn't add too much more, but it is a good companion piece.
It's also Lemire, right?
Yeah.
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 He was cooking at that time, so I might actually. Now I'm in 52 mode, so I might actually go back and do that. I've
It's
read a
good.
lot of bullshit over the last few days, but I could use a palate cleanser of some good stuff.
I like how the
Yeah.
palate cleanser is a guy made of human flesh. Like,
Hell yeah. There's a book I can't wait to talk about. I'm not going to spoil it yet. We'll talk about it next week. But there's a book that I think fell under most people's radars. I think because it got canceled early. It features a character I don't give a damn about, who just so happens to be a talking point right now for a reason I won't explain. But I guarantee you that when I mention this book, you'll say, "What the fuck?" And if you go and read it, you'll be like, "Oh, I see what the fuck."
as I was going through the list, I was going through like the DC Wiki, which is essentially every book before Rebirth. Is like New 52, and Rebirth is the next real phase. Gale said there wasn't much he liked. I had trouble narrowing down to 5. Yeah. I actually, looking back on it, I liked a lot of stuff. A lot of the stuff was not the mainstream stuff, but a lot of like the tertiary titles I was really enjoying at the time.
Yeah, I think that's that was my problem. I wasn't venturing out enough.
There were a lot of minis that I think really stand out. That 6 issues here, 12 issues there, that made up quite a bit.
We've got a couple people sharing their top 5, so we can hit those. Amin threw his out: Forever Evil, Court of Owls, Dark Side War, Rot World, and Multiversity. You went big.
Nice.
I like it. I agree with
See-
a lot of that.
C.W. Gordon has an honorable mention: Demon Knights, Batman Eternal, Batgirl, Justice League, Wonder Woman, and Batman.
That's a good one.
Tevye Smolka says, honestly, for me, my top 5 were Animal Man, Justice League, Batman, Court of Owls, Batman and Robin by Peter J. Tomasi, and Rot World. I gotta get on Rot World.
Good.
Dude, it's so good.
David Melendez Doria says Jail Dark, Batgirl, Wonder Woman, Batwoman, and Batman.
Pete Foltz, Kefis, Sean's mortal enemy, said number 5, Batman Incorporated, number 4, Wonder Woman, number 3, Animal Man, number 2, Frankenstein, Agent of Shade, and number 1, iVampire. Me and Pete have very similar tastes usually, so I fuck with that list. That's a good list.
Ritesh K says, "Do you folks have guests on the podcast?" Thanks for the question, Ritesh. Good to see you. Haven't seen you before that I can recall. Yes, actually, we had Omar from Near Mint Condition on the podcast a few weeks ago. This year alone, we've had Kelly Thompson on the show, Philip Kennedy Johnson, Brian Hill. Historically, we've had Jeff Johns on a few times, Gary Frank. Big names I'm missing.
Ram V,
of course.
Yeah.
Al Ewing,
Heather Antos.
Heather Antos, yeah, of course.
Lots of creators. Yeah, we love doing interviews here. Luna says Supergirl and Batgirl and Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman were the only books I read since I was still new to comics. Well, Luna, you seem to be new to us, so thank you for being here. Appreciate that. You know what? I don't think I read Supergirl. but Batgirl and Wonder Woman were quite good. I mean, Batgirl is in my top 5. But Wonder Woman was quite good. I'm about to start rereading that here this week.
That's
Azarello and Cliff Chang,
yeah.
And that Suicide Squad, I think it was actually after Jim Lee left the book, or the initial writer of the book left. It got good. There's some really good stuff in that Suicide Squad run.
Ray Fox?
Give me 2 seconds to figure it out.
Or is that pre-Ray Fox?
Am I nuts? Did we not read a Suicide Squad book drawn by Jim Lee for a book club or something?
No, I think that was Bruno Redondo.
That was Bruno Redondo. Okay. Yeah. Tom Taylor.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard Red Lantern stuff was really good. I feel like I ended up missing out on some of the Lantern pieces because it felt so far from what I was reading at the time and what I was familiar with. But I recognized there was a whole world of that.
Jim Lee drew Suicide Squad during Rebirth with Rob Williams on writing. That's the one that's good.
That's what I'm thinking.
So maybe not New 52, but that one's good.
That didn't work for me, I'll say.
Ritesh in the chat says, thanks for answering the question. Love all of you. The vibes are great. I'm always on the lookout for new comic stuff. Doing a PhD in comic study in the US. Much love. Good shit, dude.
Oh, that's awesome. Good luck to you with that. It's incredible.
We've been cited in papers before, so if you need to,
have we?
Yeah, we have actually.
No fucking way.
Yeah.
Whose? Do you know who?
Yeah, friend of mine a long time ago.
Okay, that's funny.
So if you need some citation help, I can point you in a direction.
Sean, Aaron Ruiz mentions there has to be some stories about Convergence. We're probably going to get to Convergence soon, right?
Oh, yeah.
The old move
if you have any thought about anything that happened in the New 52 that is controversial or bad or crazy, it will come up. I have to generate at least one more week of these. It will come up.
Convergence at least gave us Doc Shaner on a Shazam book. That's all I remember.
Oh,
the rest
was good.
Out of my brain.
Yeah.
Len Wein came back for a hot second on Swamp Thing.
I really want to read through other people's lists because I respect the fact that you guys are sharing yours and I love it so much. So can someone hit Leatrix's list and also Tyson's?
Yeah, I've got Letrix. Number 1, Batman. 2 through 5, whatever pals have turned me on to. Forever Evil from Talks Here, Batwoman, and before, Sean said I was already set on Swamp Thing and Animal Man. That's 5. 4 I've never read, and now I'm excited about.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Awesome.
And Tyson LaFrance's list is number 5, Grayson, number 4, Batman Inc., number 3, Batman and Robin, number 2, Detective Comics, and number 1, Batman. I see a thread there. I think Tyson he might be a Batman fan.
Likes the Flash, huh? A whole family. Phenomenal AC. New 52 made Aquaman relevant, in my opinion. I never cared for the character before. I will say there's some good stuff out there in like the 90s, late 80s. Peter Milligan did some stuff. Rick Veitch did some things. New 52 definitely brought Aquaman into relevance, but he's always been cool.
Marco about to embark on an Aquaman deep dive.
We've all decided Swamp Thing's too cool now.
Right.
Marco's got to pivot to Aquaman.
The hardest pivot into Aquaman.
It's been almost 10 years we've been giving Marco a hard time about Swamp Thing. It's like, oh, you guys are into him now. Fuck it.
Yeah.
I'm tired. Rot World. He's like, no. I gotta go deeper.
I'm out.
Marco, has a Swamp Thing Aquaman crossover ever really happened?
Yeah, in New 52. That's the reason that I started to work my way backwards with the character. There was like a 2-issue crossover, one where Aquaman pops on Swamp Thing's book, and Swamp Thing goes onto his book.
I will Jeff Parker's run in Aquaman.
Yeah.
I like Jeff Johns' run. I think Jeff Parker's is more my jam.
Yep, agreed.
I cut it for time, but man, Jeff Parker has a story too.
Oh, I bet.
No, damn.
Yeah.
But was that art on that Pelletier?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good.
And then it goes into the guy who did PKJ's books. He did that Vertigo book PKJ did.
Oh, fuck. I'm forgetting.
Yeah, I'm forgetting
I'm
his name,
blanking.
too. Yeah, sorry.
That was with Bun. I didn't like that.
Ahmed says, "Hi Marco, are you enjoying Aquaman's current book?"
Yo, don't sass me.
Damn.
Cole, you got it. You got it, Cole. You know what I mean. Mike Comics, who I haven't seen here before, welcome. Mike says, never forgive DC for screwing up their continuity and messing with Poe's brightest day plans. Hey, I hear you, man. I understand.
Feel that. I feel
100%.
that.
Now, since chat has been so incredible, we've got 90 plus people here. We've been holding strong the entire time, even during the Palsverse intro, which I'm very happy about and proud of. I want to do something special. But before I do that special thing, I
right.
need to actually shout out a few more people because in my exhaustion from delivering to you guys the Palsverse members, I neglected to include some new faces whose names we need to shout out, even if they are owed an origin. So Todd Butler, thank you for being a part of the Palsverse. C.W. Gordon, thank you so much. And David Melendez Doria, who I saw in the chat. So thank you so much.
Joined
Yeah.
today. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys all have your origins impending. Really, really appreciate you guys being a part of this. Thank you. Okay. Now, the thing that I wanted to do is I want to do a quick giveaway. I feel like you guys deserve something good for being so good today. And so what we're going to do is we're going to give away 5 memberships. Yeah. So if you guys are ready for it, here we go. Gifting now. Hopefully it doesn't take forever. There we go.
Give it to me. Come on.
There we go.
Hey, nice.
Congratulations to Luna, Noel
Oh, wow.
Martinez, Boss Rondier, the Living Blade himself, Harris Peguero. Harris, good to see you, buddy. Julia Raul, who is new as of last week, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Congratulations to all of you.
Enjoy.
Yes. We see some pals heads in the chat. Uncanny Soup gets it. Michael Nadeau gets it. Let me see those. All right. Let's do one bit of news. Just one. Because I really wanted, we haven't talked about any Marvel stuff. Certainly nothing good lately.
Do we have to?
Just one. Just one. Because
Alright,
I want to show a little love to Marvel. And I think it's a book we'll probably all be somewhat interested in. So this week, Marvel announced that they were putting out a book that has sort of been teased by the writer for some time, and that is a book titled HELLHUNTERS. So HELLHUNTERS is a 5-issue series written by Phillip Kennedy Johnson, who we love, with art by Adam Gorham, who I love. Tyler apparently does too.
Adam Gorham's great. Yeah.
Hell yeah. And they're going to be telling a story that features one of the most popular characters coming out of the Incredible Hulk run that PKJ is currently on, the Ghost Rider of 44. So here's the idea. In the present day, Ghost Rider 44 can only reawaken when the monsters come. During World War II, there were plenty of them, including Felix Bruckner, a Nazi officer who underwent a mysterious transformation of his own. When Bruckner's demonic army begins its march, Sal will be forced to embrace his supernatural new gifts to turn the tide of the entire war. Some of Marvel's most badass heroes fought on the front lines of World War II, and HELLHUNTERS will see Ghost Rider 44's battle alongside the likes of Wolverine, Nick Fury, Peggy Carter, Bucky Barnes, and from the pages of Jason Aaron's Avengers, Soldier Supreme. So it's the heroes of 1944 beating Nazi ass. What more could you want from a comic?
Whoa, too political.
I always like seeing Bucky with a gun. It just seems like a child with a gun, and he looks a little too happy to be firing it. You know?
Yeah. I think it's especially interesting to me because it's not an Invaders title.
Yeah.
And and the Invaders tends to be like this golden age superhero style team. This feels like something that's down and dirty.
It's Howling Commandos, really.
Yeah.
With demons. So yeah.
I love this shit.
Yeah.
Normally I don't really care too much for books that don't take place in the current moment, but the fact that the creative team is one that I really like. PKJ clearly wants to do this. It's not like a mandate. This is what he wants to do. And they're punching Nazis. Like, that's just like you're 3 for 3.
What did PKJ tweet about this? He's like, hey, you want to fuck up some Nazis or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Amazing. Yo, I've not heard of Adam Gorham. I don't think, but...
Did a run on Rocket Raccoon. That was pretty good. I think it was like during Marvel Now. I know he worked with a friend of the show, Mark Bouchard, on one of their anthologies.
Okay.
I just remember Gorham drawing like a goblin coming. That's what I remember. But
yeah, I'm looking through the art. It's real good. Good inks, nice pencils. That's gonna be cool, especially with PKJ and this kind of a character. That's gonna be a lot of fun. Dude, anything that PKJ touches, yes, buy. Thank you. On Palsverse. Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
It's on Palsverse, yes.
Amin says he mentioned he wanted to do a Wolverine book when you guys interviewed him. So cool. Yeah. Yeah. So he got, at least he got to use Wolverine. We'll see if he gets a solo title. I actually feel like PKJ would have been an amazing writer for the Wolverine ongoing. Not to denigrate Saladin Ahmed, but I just think PKJ makes a lot of sense for that.
Yeah. Is he on both? He's he's playing in both sandboxes right now, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep. Oh yeah.
And doing hot too.
Yeah.
Cosmo says, I saw that cover and the premise and thought it was an indie, lol. That's kind of sick. Ain't no indie with anybody who looks that cool riding a motorcycle. Come on. Ghost Rider doesn't have much, but he has that.
Got a fucking motorcycle.
And Soldier Supreme is one of the weirder parts of Jason Aaron's Avengers run. He's a World War II soldier who has the Eye of Agamotto, and he has like a demon flesh gun.
What?
That feels very like Existenz Cronenberg. It's a weird thing. He's got a great handlebar mustache. I'm excited for it. Yeah.
Tyson LaFrance says, I'm not touching Hellhunters. Respectfully. My pull list already way too big. Looks good though. PKJ Hulk is really good.
Yeah, I respect that. I mean, Marvel and DC are asking a lot of us right now. I'm about to do a whole like reshuffling, honestly. With everything that DC has coming up, I'm about to do a call.
Damn.
It's time.
Yo, pull list is going through a crisis.
We about to go from the 16 average title to
32.
Yeah, 17.
Heroic Age says Marvel World War II books often struggle to break 10 issues. Hopefully this doesn't run into a wall. Lucky that this is actually a 5-issue mini.
Nice.
That's what I was going to say.
All it needs to be. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Get out. Whoa.
Love it. What else? Luna says, I might check out the first issue, though, with all incoming and all the X books I'm reading. I might have to trade weight it if it's good. This is what I'm saying. We have to make a choice. Collectively.
Easy. Drop X-Men.
Whoa.
Done.
No.
We're going to drop
part of it?
I won't be doing that.
Oh,
Can't do it. Can't have it.
I'm going to have to drop certain titles, though. I won't say which ones, but I'm going to have to drop some titles. I'm not doing this again.
How's Monstrous doing?
That's different. Monstrous is different. And I know the chat voted for me to drop it. I'm not dropping it. You guys were wrong. You voted wrong. I'm not dropping it.
I think they said keep it, no?
I don't think they said keep it because I'm not reading it.
Oh well, I don't know.
I'm pretty
Guys,
sure that, yeah.
Sean hates money. Hates it.
Just likes comic. He loves comics.
Loves
Really
comics,
good.
hates money. He's allergic to it. Can't stand to have it on him.
Mike Hank says, "Glad to have catch this live. Welcome, bud."
Hey, what's up, Mike? Good to see you. Yeah. Izzy says crisis of infinite stacks.
Yep.
Hero Gage says Sean's pull list about to go through the crisis of finite dollars. You damn right. You damn right.
I might. Maybe I'm going to be talking out of my ass here. I might read every issue 1
Oh, for sure.
Of what?
of All In and Absolute.
Yeah, dog. We're on Pals Pulls. That's what we're doing.
You think we're going to review Harley Quinn #1 when we only have 5 books that week?
Well, there is no Harley Quinn #1, but I guess what you
Sure,
mean is
yeah.
the new.
So no.
Yeah, the new teams, the relaunches with the new logo and everything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Aaron Ruiz says, "Drop mantras," and then CW Gordon, not 2 messages later, follows up with, "I missed the vote. Do not drop mantras."
There it is. That's the binary. I can't do it though. It's got to end at some point, right? Like it's 50 issues plus deep. I don't want to drop it now because if I drop it now, I'm gonna miss the end, and it's got to end, right?
Sure.
Right?
He's been going for 50 issues. Probably not.
Been going for 50 fucking years, Kale. This book won't end.
David Melendez Doria says, if Sean stops buying all these books, I'll have to blind buy books. Don't put that pressure on me.
And blind buying books is sometimes what Sean does, and that's how he winds up with second printings.
Dude. That saga that burned my ass, bro. That really did. I was so aggravated by that. But no, I'm gonna have to drop some things. Not ASM. I mean, don't lose your mind now. Don't lose your mind. Come on now. New
drop
wave
Saga.
of Ghost Machine books coming. Yes, that is true.
Yeah. Right.
Gosh,
Yeah,
Nine
yeah,
Street
you-
looked damn good too.
There's a whole section of Marvel you could drop, and it would solve several problems.
But I don't want to.
Yes, you do.
I
you
don't
do.
actually.
You do,
I
yeah.
really love reading X-Men comics.
Why you pick one?
And Sean, we got 2 more announcements of X-Men books this week too.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Magic.
Magic.
And,
Oh yeah.
Rogue Savage Land with the
fuck that.
Kari
That is-
Andrews cover of
No.
Smutty Rogue.
Look, I'll just get the cover. You don't need.
That's when she was doing tricks on Magneto. She was farting on it probably back in the Savage Land.
Izzy says next Pals event, sunk cost fallacy gauntlet.
Did I drop Wonder Woman? Asks Aaron Ruiz. Yes. Yes, I did. And you want to know the truth? I'm going to tell you guys. As much as I rag on that book and genuinely don't like it, when I see that it's coming out and I don't get it, I feel weird. I feel guilty. I feel like I'm supposed to buy it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
to be honest with you, I read an interview. It had quotes from who's the artist on that?
Same pair.
It had quotes from Sampere talking about how they're going into the end of the Sovereign stuff and how exciting it's about to be. And I was like, oh shit. Huh. I want to see how it ends. I want to see how that stuff goes.
You want to see how it
Jump
ends?
back in.
I was gonna say they're gonna be starting to do the stuff that you don't care about. Like, well, they're getting rid of the stuff you don't care about.
Yeah, I want to see how all that ends. Like all the Sovereign stuff. Like, how does Wonder Woman beat the Sovereign?
Probably with the text box.
Probably by saying no thank you. Yeah. No, I will not be repurchasing it.
She beats him by sending him a video of her singing "Imagine" by John Lennon.
I get that reference.
Amin said Sean doesn't know that the industry is on his shoulders. If he drops some books, we are about to witness another 29 what?
The year?
Oh, the 1929, like a depression?
Depression.
Oh, I see.
If Sean drops his books, World War III will happen. That is the
fucking
domino
entire
effect.
the entire economy is gonna collapse.
Dude, if things don't start to change, we're gonna have World War Sean, because I'm gonna have to tear shit up. I'm done. I'm looking at my stack right here of books from the last week, and I'm like, what should I drop? I want to.
You just moved.
I
Like
want to. Let's move past that. I want to get rid of some of this stuff. Like, I have too many books that I'm pulling right now that need to go. There are going to be changes, pals.
Are we going to be
Tell
part
me.
of the process, or is this going to be a Sean endeavor?
I don't know.
Oh, interesting.
We'll see. I like to include you guys in the
Sean Stack.
That's funny.
Is Sean
I
Stack?
thought-
It's a feature of the show.
I took that question as, are we going to be part of the process? Are we changing? As far as I know, we're not, unless there's a surprise letter coming my way.
Unless we have an announcement to make.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Go ahead, Tyler.
No, never mind. It's fine.
Michael Nadeau says, who will be eliminated? Tune in next week to find out. The tribe will speak.
Yeah.
The same way we voted Ultimate X-Men off the island, maybe one of the pals is next to go.
Onto the
Wow.
pole. Well, wasn't there like a purgatory land in one of the seasons where like you're technically not quite off yet, but you could at some point come back in?
Of Survivor, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
I dropped Survivor like 3 seasons in, so I'm not sure.
Oh damn! I watched. Yo, me and my family. That was like our show. We watched that. I think like 10 seasons.
Sean's more of a Bachelorette guy,
I actually despise The Bachelor.
and you wrote it into the script for the.
It's Simon's life, not my
Sure,
life.
Easy.
sure,
Yeah.
sure.
It's easy.
Amin says Sean culling books is going to be like that scene with Negan in The Walking Dead. I would love it if somebody could put together that meme of me as Negan
Just
walking through that scene and just chopping books. Just who was that guy? Gary, not Gary. Glenn. Glenn's head.
Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross.
Glenn's head could be. I don't know. It could be Wonder Woman. No, it should definitely not be Wonder
Yeah,
Woman.
no.
That's not. I don't mean to
I'm
put that out.
photoshopping it now.
Just like some book, and just cut. I would love to see that.
Just give me the title, Sean. I'll get it to you in 5 minutes.
I don't know what I'm cutting. Oh, well, I started pulling Avengers. That shit's probably going to get dropped with the next issue. So,
Again?
that.
You started pulling it again?
Well, because we read issue 17 for the show.
Storm did a lot for him.
Storm joined. It was cool.
Black Queens forever.
And look, I'm with that, but
Okay, as much fun as we're having, it is time to close the show out. Thank you so much for watching. Before we go, do not go. Smash the like button.
smash it.
Make sure you're subscribed. The next time we will be live with you is this Thursday at 6 p.m. Yes, Pals Pulls is back to its normal time. We're going to have a great time because on this week's episode of Pals Pulls, we have Superman number 18, Absolute Power Super Son number 1, Batman the Barbarian number 1, X-Men number 4, and the Power Fantasy number 2 finally actually dropping, so we will be able to actually review it. And of course, whatever you guys vote in via the poll, head on over to youtube.com/thecomicspals under the community tab and vote in the listener pick poll. You guys are already doing that like crazy, so continue that up. Keep voting. CW Gordon says, "Didn't Barbarian get delayed?" Jesus Christ, are you serious? Well, I guess I'll have to rework.
Yeah, I thought that happened too. Yeah.
I put these together about a month in advance, so if that happens, I don't catch it. So I guess sorry.
We'll have to put something else in there.
Yeah. We'll have to pick another comic. I'm sure we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I got delayed, Sean. Yeah.
Thank you guys
Indefinite.
so much. Indefinite.
Definitely delayed. Whoa.
Yeah, you got taken off the solicits.
And that's a part of the new Elseworlds initiative that they
Yeah.
have. So that's not good.
Not anymore.
Wasn't that with somebody
Smallwood.
interest?
Smallwood.
Oh yeah.
And then right after that book got announced, he went on a bit of a Twitter spree. I don't know if it's related because that was months ago, but
He's been silent too. I think. I think the Twitter has closed up shop. Not closed up shop, but I don't think he's been active.
at least on Twitter, yeah. Maybe he's on Truth Social. I don't know.
Aye. I hope to see you guys on the Discord server. Hope to be able to hang out with you there until Thursday when we can join up again and have a great time. Also, I keep neglecting to mention this. I want to get this out there. It's at the end of the show. I'm sorry. We have community book clubs that happen in the Discord server that are amazing. So if you enjoy the deep dives, if you enjoy our book clubs here, a community book club happens that's organic, made by you guys, for you guys. They just covered Squadron Supreme from the 80s. It was incredible. I think the next book on the docket is DC 1 Million.
Yep.
So if you have an interest in that, a familiarity, whatever the case may be, make sure that you head on over there and check that out. Because we're always having a great time on our Discord server. CW Gordon, fuck that. We are not going to add Wonder Woman to the docket next week. It's not happening. Sorry, the tribe has spoken.
I heard the
He says,
Survivor.
please don't. I can't take it anymore.
I heard the Survivor chant in my head too.
All right. We're out of here. Thanks a lot. We appreciate you. We love you. Until next week, take care, guys.
See you next